Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Creation Myths. Today, I am going to review the biggest cluster of a debate I have ever watched in my life. It was this debate, and I will confess I didn't even watch the whole thing because it was just a giant mess. So this was a debate, obviously, on modern day debate, which let me just take a minute and talk about modern day debate. Don't go on modern day debate. Nobody should go on modern day debate. Modern day debate is the proverbial Nazi bar. They host literal Nazis, such as Richard Spencer, Laura Southern, and Nick Fuentes, and use them, here you go, in their promotional materials, right? There's Nick Fuentes right there in the corner. So, don't go on modern day debate. Modern day debate is bad. It's the bad place. It's the Nazi bar. Nobody should go on modern day debate. Nobody should watch modern day debate. How did I watch this video? I downloaded it. I didn't give modern day debate any views, and neither should you. Modern day debate is bad. They host literal Nazis. They should be ostracized. That's just how it is. Second thing, let me tell you about who is in this debate. So you can see in the thumbnail half of our participants here. So we've got Donny Deals standing for truth. And I will tell you, I'm going to skip the openings. So Donny, he's going to do his normal Gish Gallop thing. If you've seen one Donny debate, you've seen them all. He does the same thing he always does. His debate partner, not pictured here, is Sam, who is completely useless, complete waste of space in a conversation like this. In his opening, he's going to do the, well, how do you even know what truth is thing that he does. Then on the other side, we have pictured Dr. Ron Garret, who is going to do his normal opening. If you've seen one of his debates, you've seen him do this before. He's going to do the thing where he talks about how evolution is a consensus and creationists need to be able to address the reasons why that is the case. And creationists, because they don't understand nuance in general, or at least pretend to not understand nuance, will always respond to that as though it is an argument from authority. And to be fair to Dr. Ron, that's not what it is. It's more of like a Bayesian thing. Like you have to accept the preponderance, the overwhelming consensus as a thing that exists in your priors when you're considering whether evolution is true. So it's not an argument from authority. It's more sophisticated than that type of argument. But creationists, either purposefully or out of an inability to understand that distinction, always present it as an argument from authority. And then our final participant here, Ron's partner, is First Amender, who I went and looked, had done some debates with Kent Hovind. And he does like a pretty down the middle opening for the evolution side, just talking about like various lines of evidence that support evolutionary theory, pretty mainstream, no surprises there. So I'm going to skip over the openings, right? I gave you everyone kind of the thumbnail version of the openings, and we're going to get right into the back and forth exchange here. And so this is going to start with Donny talking about his Y chromosome dissimilarity thing, which I have explained to him and other people have explained to him multiple times. But he does it anyway because this is a thing that Donny does. I'm going to point this out as we go through this approximately an hour. It's what is it? It's about 50. Let me check. It's 53 minutes what we're going to go through here. I'm going to point out at least one major time where Donny uses an argument that he knows is wrong, but he's using it figuring that his opponents will not have the response to it. It's just a tremendously dishonest approach to what he does. And it's very typical for him. So just to give you the context here again, First Amender had in his rebuttal period responded to Donny's Y chromosome dissimilarity thing, and that's where Donny's gonna pick up the ball here with this open back and forth. And I'm just gonna go through and pause this periodically as there's stuff that I want to say about it. The thing that I want everyone to kind of come into this with is that this is not good. Nobody here is doing a good job. This is an everybody sucks here situation, including the moderator. Magic Mike here, the moderator, is awful. You'll see. Just we're gonna go through it. It's a mess, and yeah. Let's do it. Let's experience this together, everyone. Here we go.
Timer right now. You guys can pick it up where you left off.
If I could jump in real quick, because I do appreciate that First Amender attempted to provide a mechanism for the Y chromosome dissimilarity. If I can run for a few minutes.
Okay, see, here's another thing that Donnie does that's some real BS that moderators should not allow. And if you're going to debate Donnie, in addition to like knowing what he's going to say ahead of time and being actually prepared, one of the things you need to stipulate is that you can use slides during your opening and at no point at other times. Because he does this where he'll do a screen share, and the moderator has to allow this and actually put the slides up. But Donnie will do a screen share during the open exchange part, so you can't see the opponents. It's complete nonsense because it means that you don't have a level playing field during the opening. It's just a manipulative tactic that he does that everyone should be on the lookout for, call it out, and disallow it. It's complete nonsense. So let's hear what he's got to say here.
A few points by him on
Now,
that
minutes,
issue.
I personally cannot
You
grant
minutes.
you because you guys are gonna need
See,
to
before
do
you
some
dive
back and
into that,
forth.
I'd like to make a couple
No,
of suggestions.
like I was going to ask him a question. I wasn't going to talk for a few minutes. I remember I meant I had a question for him and see if he could.
Well,
when
before
his
you ask
thoughts
his
on it.
question, would you mind answering mine, the one that I already posed to you?
Sure.
By the way, this is a thing Donnie does here where he wants to know exactly what genetic changes were lost in the Y chromosome lineage. If you look at different Y chromosomes, there are big differences in size between Y chromosomes across different great apes. In particular, the chimp Y chromosome is very different from the human and gorilla. And he wants to know what the changes are in each lineage. And the thing is, he actually shows a picture that answers that question. He's just trying to muddy the waters here and basically ask for something that is irrelevant to the question that the opponents clearly aren't going to have an answer to unless one of them is savvy enough to be like, hey, that picture you showed has the answer to this. You can just look at that picture. But yeah, that's what he's doing here.
End of my rebuttal,
Well, did you want to start with your question then, Ron, to be fair?
if you don't mind. I mean,
yeah,
it's
I
a
don't
simple,
mind.
it's a simple
Yeah.
question. I'm just trying to get a rough answer, a rough idea of the magnitude of the task before us as you see it. In other words, is there a list of like 10 problems that if we could satisfactorily address them, you would change your mind?
Close the
Or is it
screen share for
100 problems or 1,000
Yes,
problems?
Mike. That's my screen.
Yeah,
But Mike, if you want, you can leave it up since I'll go right into my question. But yeah, so that's my screen shared. But I'll ask Ron's question because my answer is going
just
to
so
bring us.
people could see all you guys when he's asking the question. And
Oh, do you need me to click to stop?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. And then just let me know when I can share
For
it
sure.
again. So it's a great question, Ron.
So there's a problem here that I don't know if you caught. either Magic Mike colossally sucks as a moderator because he's running this show. So he's the one that should be controlling what's on screen at any given time. He doesn't need to ask Donnie to put his screen down. He can just do it. The other alternative here is that Donnie, a debate participant, is actually controlling what's on screen at any given time, which is a huge problem. Either the moderator is terrible or a debate participant has moderation power. Now, MDD bills itself as a neutral platform. If one of the debate participants has moderator powers during the debate to control what's on screen, that's not a neutral platform. That's a problem. So another problem with MDD, terrible moderation and or blatant unfairness. Take your pick. I don't know which it is in this case.
And it comes down to the question. Does genetics support creation or evolution? Obviously, you say evolution, I say creation. We put forth what we believe are a lot of challenges.
You've misunderstood my question. My question is, you started listing some things that you said were problems for evolution.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if you had the time to complete that list, how long would it be? The answer to that question is a number or a rough guess at a
Oh,
number.
it would be a long list. I mean,
How long?
I brought up
10,
5 names.
100, 1,000, 10,000? How many problems are there on your list?
Quite a few. I'd say a couple hundred.
A couple of
if we're going to
100.
bring in the age of the earth and geology, I mean, right now this is just genetics. So if you want to bring in chemistry, you want to
Okay.
bring in, but I'm bringing up what I believe are the largest.
I, by the way, have an answer to your requested.
Okay, so that was an interesting question from Dr. Ron. And you'll notice Donnie didn't give a particular answer because the topic of the debate is, does genetics support creation or evolution? which don't get me started on the whole like the debate topic is a question rather than a claim, and there's an affirmative or whatever, right? The structure is all messed up here. But that aside, the topic of the debate is, does genetics support creation or evolution? And we've got Donnie here bringing up like age of the earth and like not relevant. So like, stay on topic. And this is not just a Donnie thing. This is a creationist thing where they have their spiel, they have the things they want to talk about. They're going to talk about them independent of the topic that they're supposed to be talking about. And this is just another example of that way of manipulating the discourse in the way that they want to.
Mechanism.
Yeah, well, I want to say this, and then we're going to hand it to First Amender if you don't mind to answer this question, because would I change my mind is part of Ron's question. I think it's a good question. And there's a lot of points we could discuss. I mean, I could say, oh, the sky is blue, therefore creation's true. The earth is round, therefore evolution's true. These are agnostic points. Both models, a lot of different models can explain the data. So I want to focus on points like, let's say, if the majority...
Right, before he says what would be a non-agnostic point, I want to point out that he gets this whole thing wrong all the time. Donnie loves to say, oh, yeah, nested hierarchies, those are agnostic. Finding similarity across this and that, that's agnostic. Observing whatever speciation is agnostic, right? The trick that he's doing there is that evidence for a hypothesis comes in the form of accurate predictions, right? There's a difference between when evolutionary theory makes an accurate prediction about the pattern of similarity we expect to see in a group of organisms, for example, and the fact that you can take your creation model and say, oh, my model can accommodate that evidence too. That evidence does not disprove my creation model. Okay, but those are not equal to each other, right? If I have a theoretical framework and I make a prediction based on that theoretical framework, like I find a specific fossil in a specific place that has specific traits in rocks that are a specific age, that is very strong evidence for my hypothesis, and that's something that has been done, right? That's tectonic. Now, creationists can turn around and say, well, we can accommodate that. Sure, there's nothing stopping, a weird intermediate, fish amphibian thing from existing at some point in the past in sedimentary rot in an area where sedimentation was happening. Okay, but you didn't specifically predict where that fossil would be found, what traits it has, and the age of the rocks in which it would be found, right? Evolutionary theory specifically made those predictions. So Donnie likes to brush aside really strong evidence for evolution by saying, oh, we can accommodate that too. But that's not the same level of evidence, right? An accurate prediction is the coin of the realm in science. If you've got the goods, you're going to make accurate predictions. Being able to retcon your pet theory to fit that same evidence is not good enough, right? You need to show that you have the goods, that you can also make accurate predictions. And that's the bait and switch Donnie is doing here with his agnostic evidence thing that he says all the time. And I want everyone to stop letting him slide on it because it's embarrassing. Everyone needs to know how to respond to that, and I just showed you how to do it. Let's get back to it, because now he's going to provide some evidence that is non-agnostic, that he thinks would be non-agnostic, and I think this is really interesting. This is a clip I'm going to use in the future.
Of the genome is junk based on evolutionary leftovers, all these genetic mistakes that First Amender is talking about, then on that point, that would lean evolution, because now we're looking at genomes littered with evolutionary leftovers. But if we find genomes of treasure, genomes of function, well, then that would point more towards creation. So I think there's certain points we can debate, and depending on what's true, one side versus the other is going to be forced to say, okay, yeah, that fits better with either evolution or creation. But one major point.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on from that, I want everyone to stick a pin in that junk DNA thing, because when this video airs right now, when this goes public, 1 week before that, I will have had, as long as everything scheduling stays, on rails, I'll have had a conversation on that topic with Dr. Jay Weil, who not that long ago was on SFT talking about that topic of junk DNA. And I would love to know how that conversation affects Donnie's calculus on that issue.
Is what First Amender wanted to discuss.
Yeah, so standing for truth, you've got a couple of things. Number one, I can either provide you the explanation for that mechanism, or there's a couple of questions that I have for you that I would like to go over.
Well, I want to ask you.
Who is sharing this? Like, who is making this decision to share the screen? Because Donnie wasn't even talking during that, right? So how is this terrible moderation? Or again, Donnie is the one controlling the screen, which is ridiculous.
Which one?
Well, because you mentioned recombination.
No, I'm asking you which one. I'm providing you the option to choose which one that you wanted. Did you want the explanatory mechanism, or did you want the two questions that I had specifically for you?
Let's start with the explanatory mechanism, then we'll shift to your question,
Yeah,
since
so-
Ron just had a
This is, by the way, the explanatory mechanism for the loss in the Y chromosome. That's what we're talking about here.
question.
So you
Let's
asked
do this. Since
specifically
Ron,
the explanatory mechanism.
Yeah,
What is going on? Are you okay? I'm trying to answer it.
No, well, yeah, but allow me to reiterate the question.
Okay, again, terrible moderation. And this is a thing that Donnie and Sam are going to do throughout this series, where they're going to have someone, either Ron or First Amender, trying to address something they said, and they're immediately jumping in and interrupting them. Happens all the time. So you'll see more of that as we go.
So the audience can hear, okay? So you said recombination could largely explain the differences in the Y chromosome. And it's okay. I would agree that
Lack of recombination.
No, stop. I mean, if
Yeah,
you
a
want
lack
the full
of
mechanism, I
recombination.
can provide it, right? So during meiosis, the homologous chromosomes, they swap DNA and it helps repair the damage. The Y chromosome cannot recombine with the X chromosome because it's not an X, it's a Y, for about 95% of its length.
Right.
So what happens is, because there's no pairs, that results in harmful mutations that are harder to remove. The beneficial mutations can drag nearby mutations along with them. The DNA repair is less effective. This also cuts it in half as well, because you're talking about only among males, specifically the Y chromosome, the father to the son to the grandson to the great-grandson. Male cells divide many, many more times than, say, female cells.
I want to stop. No, I understand the story.
Okay, so everything that First Amender said there was like pretty okay. There was a little bit with the uniparental inheritance and the consequences of that, but overall that was good, right? The Y chromosome can't recombine, so you have what's called genetic hitchhiking, where if you have something beneficial or important, it drags all the bad stuff along with it. And that's also true for things like deletions, right? So you lose stuff over time because you can't decouple the losses from the beneficial stuff because there's no recombination. That was pretty good. And Donnie's going to call this a story. Now, that actually didn't get into like the stuff with like sexual selection and population, like mating dynamics and structure, in terms of the size of the Y chromosome across different apes. But again, pretty good. Credit where it's due. Donnie is going to jump to his script rather than respond to what that actually was.
You're naming the mechanism. You're given the scientific details of recombination.
You wanted me to explain the mechanism.
And
right?
You're not
what
answering
more
the
do you
question, though.
expect
No.
from him in the time we have available?
I'm literally trying to
I've already
explain the
said
mechanism.
that the mechanism is real. I want you to provide a sophisticated mathematical model. I want you to actually answer the Y
Yeah,
chromosome
if you
dissimilarity
could
challenge.
close your screen share.
Yeah.
Goalpost move. Goalpost move. I want the mechanism. Here's the mechanism. I accept the mechanism. I want a step-by-step historical recreation of what happened. Everyone see the trick? When you encounter it, call them on it. Ron got close there, right? What more do you want? But like explicitly call him on that dishonest hackery, right? That was a very clear goalpost move. Call him on it. And again, the moderator asking Donnie to put down his screen. You're the moderator. You put down the screen. You should not have other people having the ability to share their screen. This is ridiculous.
Well, I want First Amender to answer this question. It's a very basic question. I got it on
Close
the
your
screen,
screen
so he
share.
can answer it. Are you able to see this question on the screen?
Which lineage lost what? What are you referring to?
Exactly, because you got humans and chimps, and supposedly they share a common ancestor roughly 6 to 9 million years ago. You're saying the lack of recombination, the Y chromosome, can explain a lot of the differences. Okay, I want details I want to model.
That's to provide specific DNA analysis of something from 6 to 7 million years ago is physically impossible.
Okay, so answer the
think you know
question.
this.
What specific amplicons, palindromes, or gene families were
I've already
supposedly
explained to you it's not
listen,
possible
the
to have
beginnings of your
exactly what you're
sentences
looking
are starting
for.
in the middle of mine. Can I ask a single question without you interrupting?
Yeah. Also,
Okay.
if
All
we
you
Donnie's got a lot of nerve telling people not to interrupt, given what we've seen up to this point. Just want to put that out there.
doing
we
is
got the
naming.
question, so let's close the screen share so everybody can be
Okay.
seen here. Otherwise, it's just annoying.
Okay. So
Okay, answer
every
the question.
person has 2 copies of autosomes and 2 sex chromosomes, but only the males carry that Y. So that
I
means the
know.
effective population size of the Y chromosome is much smaller than that of most chromosomes. So over time, the Y chromosome is going to lose those genes. The Y contains only 50 to 60 of the total protein coding genes. The X chromosome has over 8 to 900. Do you see the problem?
No, you're dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Why was all
Can't answer the question, goes right to insulting his opponent. He literally already accepted the mechanism that answers his question. First Amender reiterates the mechanism, gives more detail, what I was hoping for, right? The effective population size stuff. And now Donnie comes back and says, you're dodging. No, but this is a debate. It's about performance. It's about posturing. It's not about actually providing factual information, right? You don't win by providing accurate information. You win by performing better than your opponent. And Donnie knows this. He has no facts to lean on, so he has to lean into the performance.
the heterochromatin lost in the pan lineage because of lack of recombination?
We don't have a way to determine
exactly.
that.
You
All
don't
of
have
that
an
is
answer.
gone.
This is a fairy tale. This is not science. You're not actually.
I just want to point out that I've specifically explained this thing to Donnie with the heterochromatin, and at least one time when we talked about this, he didn't know what the word heterochromatin meant. I'll actually throw that clip in here. I wonder if he knows what it means now. But there was a few years back when we talked about this, he tried to throw this in my face and was like, oh, heterochromatin, this, that, look at all the hetero. And I said, what does that mean right there? And he didn't know what heterochromatin meant. I had to explain the definition to him. So here he is, still using that same talking point years later, despite it being explained to him. So here's that clip, and then we'll go back to it.
There are aspects of human chromosomes and your grade 8 chromosomes, specifically chimpanzee and gorilla chromosomes, that do have some pretty significant differences. Here in this paper, it talks about the presence of these large blocks of subterminal heterochromatin and this lack of satellite DNA around human chromosomes.
Yeah, so what's heterochromatin specifically?
Repeated, it's repeated DNA basically.
Not
in
necessarily. It doesn't have to be repeated, but structurally, what's heterochromatin?
Structurally, what is heterochromatin? It's basically
what is heterochromatin?
Well, it's basically pieces of DNA within the chromosomes that is repeated oftentimes. That's my understanding.
It's not. It doesn't have to be repeated though. So the characterization heterochromatin is independent of the sequence. It refers to the physical conformation of the DNA.
Okay.
What does that mean? What is heterochromatin?
Well, I think you're playing word games here because it is. Wait, Dan. I want you to answer the question: why is this DNA? Well, why is this structure within the DNA? These structures within the DNA.
I'm answering. I'm in the process of answering that question, but I think you're making the argument without knowing what the words mean.
Okay, do you know what how would you define it if it's not just repeated pieces of DNA basically
I just want to be clear though.
That's my understanding. So if you want to,
okay, so you're wrong. Okay, so heterochromatin refers structurally to DNA that is in a condensed state in the interphase nucleus, right? So do you know what those words mean?
In the
condensed, so like structurally it is supercoiled rather than being in a diffuse state, right? So the nucleosomes are not exposed, right? They're supercoiled so that you don't have like access to enzymes that would do things like express genes. Okay, that's what heterochromatin is.
Well, it's thought to be tandem repeats.
It is largely repeats, but it doesn't have to be because it's cell type specific.
Listen, here's the thing. You just want to posture because I did give the correct answer, and then you want to get hyper technical, which I'm fine with.
You didn't give the correct answer.
No.
All right, so that was that clip. Let's just go back a second here. Now we'll pick it up with Donnie being obnoxious.
No, you're dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Why was all the heterochromatin lost in the pan lineage? Because of lack of recombination?
We don't have a way to determine
exactly.
that.
You
All
don't
of
have
that
an
is
answer.
gone.
This is a fairy tale. This is not science. You're not actually telling me. Okay,
All right,
I'll ask this.
fine.
No, I'll ask this.
Then if it is a
which
fairy tale,
lineage
no, what
lost
I
the
want from you
palindrome?
palindrome?
At a
is
time,
stop for a
please.
second. Stop for a
It's the
second.
same question,
So
but he's
then-
not
So then,
answering
if
it.
it is a fairy tale, then what I would like from you is specifically, I'm going to posit that the evolutionists are wrong and that you are right. What is your explanatory model for following the scientific fields that I've mentioned pointing to evolution? I probably mentioned about 8 separate fields
And
that
none of them
all
point to
rely on
evolution.
they all rely on evolution.
No.
So what you need to
So in his opening, just for background, in First Amender's opening, he went through, it's like genetics, geology, blah, blah, blah. He went through a bunch of fields and gave examples of how they either support or rely on evolutionary theory, which, good. And this is a good question. If we assume that you're right, now explain how we get to the observations we're making, because those observations support evolutionary theory. So how do we get from your theoretical framework to the observations that support evolution, right? That's a good question.
provide is an explanatory model for all of those things, sans evolution provided.
Yes, and this can be extrapolated. The fact that we have
Go
Y
ahead,
chromosome.
sans evolution. I'm ready to hear it. Let's
So I
hear
just
it.
wanna
No,
point out
I'm not
that
going to
you
let
did-
you
you did
dodge.
give a
I'm not
concession,
going to let
right?
you dodge and dive.
No, Sam. Sam finally enters the discussion with the dumbest comment imaginable. He takes a for the sake of argument and says, you just conceded the debate. Like, either he is, I can't believe I'm saying this, more dishonest than Donnie, or I don't know how he ties his shoes. It's one of those two things, and I don't know what the answer is. But it's one of them.
Okay,
That
you
was a
had no
I
concession.
answer.
didn't dodge and divert. You
Yes,
asked
you did dodge and
specifically for the
divert.
exact
Listen,
mechanism. I've
it's
provided
my turn to
it,
respond.
and then you're asking for
I
evidence
understand you're
that's
excited.
impossible to render.
I understand you're excited
So
because
no, it's
the
not
Y
a dodge.
chromosome
I'm
demolishes.
saying you
no, you did
physically
dodge.
cannot offer
yeah, because
that.
you're
You
trying to
cannot
divert.
offer that
All right,
evidence
Yes, I
because
can.
it's
I'm
seven.
gonna
Because you're
stop
asking
both of
for
you guys,
DNA
actually,
from
and I'm
8
gonna
million
let-
years ago. It
I'm gonna
doesn't
let
work.
Sam talk
Okay,
here.
give us a minute response each, uninterrupted, because he's not allowing me to counter him.
No, I was just pointing out
Provided.
that he made an argument. He couldn't defend his argument. He gave a concession, and his argument was just an assertion that he couldn't defend. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that that was a concession on your point.
Right.
It was just
Again, it was, let's make this for the sake of argument. That's not a concession. That's a, like, let's just say this for the sake of argument and then follow that logic, right? That's not a concession. That's a way of making an argument. I don't think Sam understands that.
I want to say.
Sorry.
I want to
No,
say
that's-
this for
that's
the
not a-
audience.
That's not a concession
His
whatsoever.
explanation,
I've
his
explained
assertion
it
of
pretty
the lack of
clearly.
Am I
you're
going to be able?
aware? I think you're aware.
Hey, Mike,
Sandy,
I think
before
we
you
should
start,
do a
that is
minute
exactly
response.
what
I
happened.
do
I want to
wanna
be able to
go-
Please
respond.
do.
To his,
Yeah, I do
I
wanna
want to be
go
able
to
to
time.
respond to his
I told you, the biggest cluster I've ever watched, and it gets worse.
Please
assertion.
do.
I do want to go to time responses. Just the moment you guys hear me talk, I wish, everybody could obviously listen and talk at the same time. It's hard, but the moment you do think you hear me, just give it a break so I can make sure we're being guided along here towards something productive. Just saying I said this, I didn't say that, we're not going to get anywhere. But I do want to go to the time and give, let's go with Ron here, a chance to pop in. And then we'll give you a full minute. And then if First Amender wants a minute, so we'll do a minute, and then we'll give back to Sam a minute, and then Donnie a minute, just so we can hit everybody there. And then if we can go back and forth peacefully, I'll drop it. But until then, let's just try to make sure everybody...
Fun game to play along with if you're watching. See how long that scheme lasts before everything breaks down again.
is
Yeah.
being heard. All right, Ron, go ahead.
I am not a big fan of these kinds of free-for-alls. I understand that some people seem to get something out of it. I don't get it. Nobody is listening. Nobody in the audience can hear what's being said. It all seems like a big waste of time to me. But I would like to know, Donnie, you accused him of not presenting a quantifiable model or not adequately answering your question. But we're under some pretty severe time constraints here. I mean, this entire debate is only going to last less than 2 hours, including all the audience Q&A. And biology is a complicated field that people study for years and make careers out of. So what would an adequate answer that could be delivered?
I just want to remind everyone that the topic of the debate was whether genetics supports evolution or creation. And to be clear, 100% supports evolution, but we haven't heard hardly anything. Even the stuff with the Y chromosome, people are arguing about the minutia, but not connecting the dots in terms of why it supports one side or the other.
Under these time constraints look like?
All right, you going to concede the last 10 seconds?
Sure.
Okay, and then you got the question right, guys? So just hold that for a minute, and then I'll let First Amendment give a quick thing just so both people on each team are getting a chance. Go ahead, First Amendment.
Yeah, so I went over specifically several fields of science where it is explaining specifically evolution as an explanatory model. You have genetics and genomics, molecular biology, evolutionary biology, paleontology, embryology and developmental biology, biogeography, comparative genomics, bioinformatics, microbiology and virology, as well as anthropology, all of which say evolution. So I posit that maybe...
Now, all of that is true, by the way. All of those fields explicitly support evolutionary theory. We've got just a laundry list of confirmed predictions, just up and down, like, yes. So now what he's saying, follow the argument, folks, because I know you all can follow it. Apparently Sam can't. So follow the argument.
The creationists are right. Maybe the evolutionists are wrong and that it's not evolution. So then what I request is provide an explanatory model for the following scientific fields I've mentioned sans evolution, as in no evolution. How do you explain all the phenomenon?
Okay. We're going to kick it over to who wants to go first? Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take a few. Not
Take
that
the minute. Take the minute.
So yeah, I mean, just listing a bunch of fields of study and saying that the fields of study say something, that's just a blunder, okay? Fields of study don't speak. Bones don't speak. Molecular molecules don't speak. Scientists speak. Okay, data methodologies are hopefully performed. You've already conceded that you cannot perform a methodology on some mysterious ancient mythical piece of DNA. You said it doesn't exist. Ron, your partner, conceded that point. It's not because it's difficult. Okay. So people speak, the data is interpreted through their perspective worldview. Donnie's
Worldview. Bingo. Put it on your bingo card. Worldview.
specifically asked you for a methodology, not an assertion. And this is the second time that you've conceded the point. You said, fine, we're just going to grant everything that you believe is false. That's not how a debate is done. You make a point.
Chat, what do you think? Is Sam stupid or is he dishonest? And I know, before you make the why not both jokes, I know. But in this specific moment, do you think that he genuinely doesn't understand what First Amender is doing here? Or do you think he's just a dishonest hack misrepresenting it for some cheap debate points? Which do you think it is? I think, man, it's such a hard question. I don't know. I have to think some more.
Point, you got to be able to engage with the point.
That's referring to positing, not
I know you're excited, but respect Mike, the moderator. We're going minute responses.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get to clap back as hard as I would as a debater, but I do, yeah, appreciate that. I would like that respect as I'm trying to give you guys the time to be fair on both sides here.
Can't respond, play the refs, right? Very, very predictable move. You got to be ready for it.
Here, Donnie's going to get a minute, and then you can say whatever you want. You can take your first minute on your team to be prompt with your response. So go ahead, Donnie. I'm starting now.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I'll start my timer too. First Amender conceded the debate. It's about genetics. These are...
Now, we know that Donnie's lying. Straight up, we know that he knows that First Amender didn't concede right there. He knows how, like, for the sake of argument, let's assume X. He knows how that works, right? So, like, this is just hackery. This is awful. And, like, everyone should recognize just how dishonest these tactics are.
Points, like in the Y chromosome. I've never seen so much dodging in my life. I mean, he's completely destroyed. He names mechanisms like lack of recombination, provides no model. To answer Ron's question, very simple.
5 minutes ago, he agreed that lack of recombination is a valid mechanism that leads to the outcomes they were talking about. So now he's totally reversed his position, Donnie has.
Show me a paper. We're the ones in our opening statement that are going paper after paper, documenting functions in ERVs, documenting functions in pseudogenes. I literally showed on screen a phylogenetic tree of mitochondrial DNA that shows low diversity, rapid and exponential population growth, variable mutation rates. This is all pointing to biblical time. Where's the thousands of generations? So, First Amender.
He doesn't know his own argument because he just said variable mutation rates in the mitochondrial DNA. The creationist position on mitochondrial Eve requires the strictest molecular clock imaginable, a strict per generation mutation rate that doesn't change. You extrapolate that rate back in time linearly, infinitely. That is the creationist position. Apparently, Donny doesn't know his own argument. If his opponents were prepared, they would be able to call him on that. It's a good example of how you need to be prepared and know your opponent's arguments better than they do.
Dodge the Y chromosome question. Which lineage lost what? Which lineage gained what? What happened to the heterochromatin? Show me a paper. Just say, here's a paper, here's the methodology, here's the population genetics rate model. He completely dodged. He's trying to go outside genetics now. I mean, come on, like actually engage our arguments. You guys have done nothing but dodging. That's a minute.
All right, Sam. Do you want to take a minute, Sam?
Sam
I
again?
thought he had one
Oh, I
already.
think it's First Amenders.
Oh,
turn.
sorry.
Or
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Right.
I thought I was
back.
doing
Yeah.
both back to back.
King
Yeah,
Levi.
my
Glad
bad.
someone's paying
Uh,
All
attention.
right, so you'll
Camera.
notice that I did not actually concede to the argument. All I said specifically posit, which means to assume, suggest, or propose something as a fact as a basic principle for an argument or a theory. So no, I did not concede to the argument. I'm specifically positing maybe you're right. Assuming you're right, provide an explanatory model for all of these following scientific fields that I've mentioned without any evolution. You cannot do that because the current most explanatory model is, in fact, evolution. Provide an explanatory model.
He's right, but you need to clap back on what he just said, right? First Amender is totally right about this, but he's not addressing the thing that Donny and Sam just said, which you need to do. You need to smack them down hard on the specific thing to show that they've got nothing, and he's not doing that, which is a problem.
Go ahead.
Okay, let me respond.
Sorry, I didn't know my mic was hot, you guys.
No, that's okay. It is funny. I mean,
Actually, can I-
we're
can I
seeing.
take
Well,
a-
yeah, hey, let me just say this, Ron. We'll throw it to you. I would just love just a single answer to the mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic. I think the only answer we got was from Ron, so I appreciate that. And he just asserted, well, mitochondrial Eve goes back 100 to 200,000 years. Yeah, not based on observed mutation rates.
It is based on observed mutation rates, and again, you need to know these arguments and how to respond to them. Creationists cherry pick single generation pedigree based mutation rates. In a single generation, you don't have purifying selection weeding out all those mutations, so you have the illusion of a much higher rate of mutation accumulation. But over long periods of time, it's not the per generation rate that matters. It's the substitution rate, the rate of fixation, the rate of accumulation that matters. And we can actually measure that directly using multi-generation pedigrees and using known settlement events like island events like Tristan da Cunha. Using those multi-generation directly observed measurements of the fixation rate, you get a time to most recent common ancestor for mitochondrial Eve, the mitochondrial most recent common ancestor, 100 to 200,000 years ago. The earliest you could possibly get using the correct methodology, experimentally validated direct observations, is 60,000 years ago, 10 times more distant in the past than the creationist can accommodate, right? How long did it take me to say that? Not very long. I would love for one of our evolution proponents in this debate to just say that. Because if you're going to enter in a debate like this, you have an obligation to know what you're talking about, know what your opponents are going to say, and know how to respond, like I just did. And by the way, I will note here just a funny thing. Standing for Truth won't debate me. He won't debate Gus Gibbon, Erica. He won't debate Dapper Dinosaur, Jackson Wheat, anyone in that circle, right? The science friends circle. He will not talk to any of us because he is a coward and he's afraid of all of us. And he knows that if he tries to pull this with any of the people I just mentioned, he's going to get shot down real hard. So he won't do it. So instead, he'll go into debates with people he thinks he can run circles around, people he thinks that he can throw an argument out that he knows is wrong and knows why it's wrong, but thinks they won't know why it's wrong. And that's what we're witnessing here.
Not based on overall DNA data. I showed several excerpts from a paper by Dr. Rob Carter in the secular literature showing very low variation in the mitochondrial DNA. I showed the data suggest
that specific paper is great evidence against the rest of his argument because the low diversity across most of the mitochondrial genome is due to purifying selection. And when you have selection, you reduce the fixation rate relative to the mutation rate, which causes those two numbers to diverge. Creationists, thank you, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, assume that they are the same. They're not. And when those numbers diverge, the time to most recent common ancestor gets pushed into the more distant past. See how easy that was? Everybody who debates these clowns should know that answer. It's not hard. You got to know the answer.
Low variation in the Y chromosome. I'm still waiting for first amender to simply say, hey, this paper published by these authors, the non-recombining Y chromosome, here's the numbers, here's what lineage lost what, here's what lineage gained what, here's where the heterochromatin went. I mean, we've received no answers to anything.
Are you asking for DNA from something that existed 7 to 8 million years ago?
No, you can reconstruct the ancestral Y chromosome sequence. You can document using mathematical
no, you can't,
models
because of the insane amounts of mutation that would occur.
I do want to give it back to Ron here.
Give it to Ron. Maybe he's got it.
Ron, I'll give you a slight bit of extra time there since
that's the second time Magic Mike and Donnie have been like kind of cooperating as moderators there. Combined with the screen share thing, does make you wonder.
It was a grab back.
I
did want to hear the question.
I'm curious about something. I have a question. So I don't have this data in front of me, but the Pew Research Organization, it's known for doing polls like this. Their most recent poll of working biologists indicated that greater than 90% of working biologists agree that evolution is true.
To be clear, it's like 99%, it's over 99%. It's virtually every working biologist accepts evolutionary theory.
I'm curious if you accept that as a fact, that greater than 90% of working biologists accept evolution, or if you think that there's something wrong with the Pew poll.
Yeah, there's definitely something wrong with the consensus. I mean,
not with the consensus, with the claim.
Second time Donnie has misunderstood that type of question from Ron. Second time.
That biologists believe this.
Yeah.
Do you believe that 90% of biologists believe in evolution?
Biologists believe they're related to grass and banana plants, but they don't have answers to the challenges that contradict what they believe. So we're looking for answers.
So we have this community of working biologists. The vast majority.
I'm gonna try to take the training wheels off. I'm gonna let.
Stop interrupting when. See, like that was actually fine.
Roll.
And Sam, if you want to engage this, because I'm really interested in the science.
Stop interrupting. Let Ron continue.
Actually, I think it's
First Amender, calm down. I know you believe you're related to a banana plant, but just try and calm down.
All right.
As Ron and Sam.
See, the immaturity, that gets you muted. Like, that should get you muted. Like, you're in a timeout now. Like, stop being a jerk.
Sam are going at it. Maybe First Amender can go and find a paper for me.
It's entertaining, but we don't need a lot of that, or else we're not going to get the arguments.
Okay, cool. So you agree that it is in fact true that greater than 90% of working biologists accept evolution, yes?
Yes. So Ron, I've already engaged with your appeal to consensus. You're repeating.
No. I'm just trying to establish. I'm just trying to establish that if we have any common ground here or not.
Answer the question or state his question.
You need to settle down. Go have some milk. Ron asked me a question. I'm going to answer the question.
He didn't even finish.
I do want to also include.
Okay. Like I said, terrible moderation all around. Interrupts when he shouldn't. Not, set the bounds when he should. Like, this is the thing that Sam does. He basically exists to derail the conversation here. Ron obviously didn't even get to his point before Sam's jumping in, thinking he understands the argument that Ron is making. It's like, come on.
Ask me a question.
Sam and Ron and anyone else, if you do ask your opponents a question and it's not clear that you're going to continue, expect him to respond, and then I'm just
No,
gonna have to let it go to that.
I did ask him a question, but he's not answering the question
Yeah,
that
so
I asked.
I'm going to
He's
answer
answering a
the
different
question.
question.
Okay.
You're
so
answering a different question.
First amender, you got to calm down a little bit. So yes, I can grant you that the vast majority of secular scientists believe in biological
I
evolution.
didn't say secular scientists. I said working biologists.
Working
Not all of whom are
biologists,
secular.
whatever-
Many of whom are
whatever.
religious.
That is an important distinction to make. Now, the data show that biologists tend to be more secular than the population overall, but there's still a giant chunk of working biologists who are religious in some way. So secular scientists is kind of drawing an unfair characterization here, right? We're talking about people practicing in the field. And, some of the most famous biologists in the world are actually very devout, like Francis Collins, who headed the Human Genome Project, wrote a whole book on this. There's also Ken Miller, who was one of the star witnesses at the Dover Intelligent Design Trial, wrote a book called Finding Darwin's God about reconciling the mountain of evidence for evolution with his Catholicism, right? So Sam is doing a very transparent bait and switch here, and he rightfully gets called on it because it was a really stupid argument to make.
Listen, whatever you want, I'll give you 99%. I'll give you everyone but the careful reasoning of at least one man. Okay?
How about Dr. Rob Carter, a working marine biologist?
Dr. Rob Carter is in no sense a working marine biologist. Let's just be clear about that right now. I recently changed some light bulbs in my house. That doesn't make me a working electrician. Okay, same thing.
Who's
the one who brought up the mitochondrial?
Let Sam answer the
single
question.
question.
If he starts let him finish it.
I'm almost done answering. Okay, I'm almost done. I can grant you whatever number you want. Nothing follows from that because the consensus has a long history of being wrong. Quick quote from someone you like, from Karl Popper. One of Karl Popper's most famous statements.
Quote mine alert. If you had quote mine on your bingo card, here you go.
On this idea of from his foundational text, The Logic of Scientific Discovery, Ron, he says, there can be no ultimate statements in science. There can be no statements in science which cannot be tested. That was your argument. You guys invoked something that cannot be tested. And therefore, none which cannot in principle be refuted. So definitionally, Ron, you guys right now are in the field of pseudoscience.
No, that's not true.
Factually, you are. If you
let me explain why that's not true.
Okay, I think I've now reached the conclusion. I think Sam is dumb and Donny is dishonest when it comes to the way they were misrepresenting First Amenders' argument before. I think that is the most defensible position based on what I have seen since then. I think that is the most defensible position here. Chat, tell me if you think I'm right or wrong.
Yeah, please.
So everything you said that Popper said, that's correct, and I subscribe to it. And you will remember that in my opening I said there is a chance that the biologists have gotten this wrong. But if you accept that they do believe this and that the Pew people are not lying about it, or that they haven't made some methodological mistake in their poll, if you accept that they believe it, then it follows that they are unpersuaded by all of the evidence that you claim to have, right?
That doesn't follow.
It doesn't follow that they're
No, that doesn't follow.
Either that or they haven't seen it, right?
Well, no, so I'm a Christian, so I'm going to appeal to something much broader. I think it's a worldview issue.
My point is,
right? It's a
you claim to have all this evidence that's
follow.
going to overthrow the status quo. Why don't you go present it to the biologists and see if you can persuade them?
So that's another mistake, because now you're committing what's called a no true Scotsman fallacy. By you're only classifying a biologist as those who agree with you.
We just established, and Sam just said for the sake of argument, right? 99% of biologists agree with evolution. It's actually more than that, but whatever. So he just changed his argument on a dime because he thought he saw an opening there, not realizing it's contradicted by what he said like 2 minutes earlier. So yeah, consistency, not the strong suit.
That's absolutely not true.
That is absolutely not true. if you provide, Sam, if
First
you
Amendment, you need to
provide,
settle down, bud. You
Sam,
really,
if you provide specifically to the evolutionary biologist an
Yeah.
explanatory model that possesses a greater explanatory power
Yeah, we
than
got
already
one.
done that.
evolution,
We've already done that.
You got one.
then you would be, well, then why are you
First Amender was asking for a while earlier, what is your mechanism? Because I provided a mechanism, First Amender. He's saying, I provided a mechanism to get you from A to B, right, with the Y chromosome stuff. What's your mechanism to explain all this stuff? And instead of answering the question, they obfuscated, told him he was dodging, interrupted, right? Totally lost that train of thought. Now they're saying, we have the better mechanism. Okay, explain it, right? So everyone see how this is going here? Now explain it, and he's going to say, First Amender, I think, is about to say what I just said, and they're going to be all, oh, they're going to interrupt. Watch.
The model that you
let me respond to that. So we made a distinction. Calm down. I made a distinction, okay, or what Ron might understand as a line of demarcation between a high quality science which can be observable, testable, repeatable, and falsifiable. Those are the lines of evidence that we are arguing tonight. You guys are
by the way, that's the Rob Stadler high quality versus low quality science thing in Rob Stadler's book on this. Dr. Rob Stadler, he doesn't mention hypothesis testing at all anywhere, which is weird if you write a book about like how science is supposed to work and you don't mention hypothesis testing. Just want to throw that out there for everybody.
Inferential, historical, low quality sciences. Your argument was literally an assertion.
Also, by the way, the choppiness in the video is in the original video. It got weird. I think it goes back to normal, but the audio is okay. But just FYI for everybody, that's how it is.
And then said, well, I'm going to concede it for the sake of argument. Yeah. You've conceded the debate twice, bud.
He doesn't even realize it.
So but perhaps
three times, actually, because you didn't engage with my argument.
I can engage in a thing referred to as a hypothetical.
Okay, give us the paper.
I posited that concept. I provided you two papers right at the beginning.
First Amender, give us the paper that lays out a model.
The exact Y chromosome and why you have exhibit specific telomere
functions. Here to debate.
What's the paper?
Literally recombinate.
What's the name of the paper that has the model documenting a lack of recombination in the Y chromosome? The beginnings of your sentences are starting in the middle of mine.
So I'll go ahead and provide it in your chat here so you can see it for yourself. Here is specifically telomeric sequencing promoting cross chromosomal rearrangement between the multiple mechanisms. And then the secondary, if you're curious as to how you can have recombination of two completely separate chromosomes into a single point, it would have to create a functional single chromosome. And so that has been replicated in yeast.
Take a breather
first. What does that paper say?
Hold on, you're
what
asking
does that paper
specifically
say?
For that information.
You're still dodging.
He is trying to answer the question, and SFT and Sam are both jumping in and interrupting his specific answer to the question that they just asked, and Magic Mike is sitting there with like not a care in the world. And it's like, what are we doing here, folks? Everybody involved. What are we doing here?
I want to make sure that you read that paper.
What does that paper say about the loss of heterochromatin in the pan?
Literally just gave an answer to the question, provide us a paper. He gave the specific paper. Now they're saying, quote me from the paper, interrupting his explanation of the paper. Completely ridiculous and awful moderation.
Lineage. What does it say about the loss of heterochromatin?
Okay, so after he explains this, before you guys ask your next question, let him put a bow on it so that you're not asking a question as he's at the tail end of it. And, you know, regardless of if you think he's going to go on a lot longer, let's just give it a quick chance. That way he can feel comfortable doing the same.
And Mike, is it okay if I reiterate it?
This is an explanation.
Mike, is it okay if I reiterate it in 10 seconds? I won't interrupt. And that way the audience can see if he answered
your question or the answer
I'll
to his
reiterate my
question
in 10 seconds. He gets an uninterrupted response.
All right, well, I'll give him a minute 30 seconds if you're going to do that.
Okay, so it's going to be a real quick. I'm going to reiterate. Where in that paper that you posted in the private chat, what does it say about the loss of heterochromatin in the pan lineage in the chimpanzee and bonobo Y chromosome? What does it say about why, how, when, where that was lost? Go ahead.
That is not the same question. He said, I'm going to reiterate my question, and then he asked a different question. The original question was, give me a paper showing the evolutionary history of the Y chromosomes and how they got the way they are, right? First Amender provided that paper. He gave him the title, he put it in the private chat. He's in the process of explaining that paper, gets interrupted to the point that the moderator has to jump in, and then rather than just go right back to First Amender, which he should have done, the moderator went to SFT, who interrupted, rather than let First Amender actually answer the question that was asked. SFT says, I'm going to reiterate my question just so we're all on the same page, because since I interrupted, maybe somebody lost, the thread here, right? But then, rather than reiterate the question, he asks a different question. He gets in what is, in effect, a follow-up question here, right? That is a dishonest tactic. Does everyone see what just happened there? How Donny manipulated that whole thing to be able to get in a follow-up question, because now First Amender, what he should do is point out that's a different question. Here's the answer to the question you asked, right? That's what he should do. And then if Donny wants to use his next time to go into the more details, he can, right? But by framing it this way, Donny has now set it up that First Amender may feel obligated to address the new question. These are the type of manipulative tactics you need to be on the lookout for and be able to call them out when you see them. You need to be able to do this in real time. Like, folks, I listened to this debate while I was doing dishes and making dinner one day. I listened to this 50-minute chunk that we're listening to right here, right? So this right now, as we're going through this is my second time. I'm not operating with any notes. I'm doing this off the cuff. And you can see how I can point out, here's the thing they're doing. Here's why this specific thing is wrong. This is what you need to be able to do if you are going to participate in a forum like this. First of all, don't do it on MDD. Already talked about that. But if you're going to do it, you have an obligation to have some level of preparedness. Come on.
You cannot determine specifically that point, and that's fine. You're asking specifically for DNA that would have existed 7 to 8 million years ago.
Yeah,
DNA does not exist that far back. Well,
and also, so see, that worked exactly the way SFT wanted it to. Because instead of finishing the answer he was giving, describing that Y chromosome paper, First Amender changed gears and he gave an answer to the question Donny asked, which is to say, we can't go back in time and look at specifically what mutations happened in what order. We can see what happened overall between A and B, but we can't do this one, then this one, then this one, then that one, because we don't have samples of DNA from that evolutionary history. That's exactly the answer Donny wanted to get, because he and Sam can then misrepresent that answer as you don't have the information that you need in order to have confidence in your model, in your hypothesis, right? Which is wrong. But now we run up against the BS asymmetry principle here, where it takes longer to explain that than it does to make the claim. Donny accomplished a couple of things there. He successfully knocked First Amender off of answering the question he asked, which had a very direct, simple answer that First Amender was giving, but by interrupting, he knocked him off that. And then, by reiterating a question that was actually a new question, he forced First Amender to address the new thing to give the answer that Donny wants, rather than finish the answer that he should have finished giving, explaining the paper, and he should have ended it by saying, and that paper contains the information you're asking for, and if you haven't read it, that's on you. You, SFT, shouldn't be making an argument out of ignorance when you don't know the literature on the topic, right? That's how First Amender should have wrapped that up, which obviously it's way easier to Monday morning quarterback, but that's how that should have gone down, right? Point out the change of topic, go back to your answer, give the answer you want to give, and then tell Donny that extra question you're asking is already answered in the paper, and if you don't know it, that's on you, bud. You should be better informed. That's how you handle a situation like that.
We can observe is at least look at our those that share the most common lineage, and then observe the DNA genomic sequencing. You are specifically cherry picking the Y chromosome, which is a very, very tiny part, and it is specifically known for having more mutations than that of the rest. What's wrong? Why can't you just let me talk?
Because you're dodging.
I mean, you're asking.
Interrupt and then claim he's dodging when he's not answering the question because you interrupted the answer to the question. This is another thing that the point that First Amender just made is getting at something important that Donny also knows. I'm pretty sure Sam doesn't. But Donnie certainly knows this, that when you do genomic comparisons, you're comparing sequence rather than structure. And the differences in Y chromosomes across different types of great apes are differences in structure rather than sequence. So what Donnie wants here, by looking at the Y chromosome exclusively and ignoring literally all the other chromosomes, is that he wants to take the standard that we use when we're doing genomic comparisons and throw that standard out and apply his own special standard, his artisanal, bespoke structure standard for similarity, rather than the mainstream that everybody uses, including creationists in other contexts, sequence comparisons, right? He wants to use the structural comparison because it makes the humans and chimps and gorillas appear to be more different than they actually are. Because if you compare the sequence regions of the Y chromosome, the genes that First Amender mentioned earlier, the 50 or 60 genes, those are remarkably similar, and they show the expected pattern of similarity where humans and chimps are more similar to each other than either are to gorillas. It's only when you use this different standard of comparison, looking at the structure of the chromosome rather than the sequence of the chromosome, do you get an unexpected comparison. Now, we have reasons why it works out the way it does. First Amendment mentioned some of them, right, in the form of the lack of recombination, genetic hitchhiking, but then there's all the effective population size, but there's also things like the mating structure within chimps compared to gorillas and humans, and sexual selection, that kind of stuff, right? There's actual explanations here, and this has been explained to Donnie, like, face-to-face more than once. But he's doing this thing where he thinks his opponents don't know those answers, so he's going to make the argument anyway, even though he knows in his heart of hearts it's a bad argument. He knows that. And then when they try to answer, he's just going to interrupt them anyway, because he can get away with that with, this wonderful moderation that we're experiencing here. Let's continue.
For the explanation, and I provide it to you. You're like, no,
right.
stop talking. Don't
Mike,
give us
you're
the
right.
evidence.
Go ahead.
We
Let
don't want to
him
hear the
finish. Let
evidence.
him
Hold on,
finish.
I got a shill for my audience. You know you're being disingenuous here. You know it. That's why you specifically picked the Y chromosome and not the X chromosome.
No, I've been asking you about the mitochondrial
similarity.
DNA. I've been asking you about the mitochondrial DNA. Why is there such low?
It's extremely similar.
Just want to say to that little bit there, preach. That was exactly right. He's being deliberately disingenuous, and he's using the Y chromosome because it has these weird structural variants, but he's using his own standard, and he knows that's wrong.
Across various different creatures and eukaryotes. You're talking about a mitochondria that exists.
So how come the
at a
mitochondrial
eukaryotic
DNA
level?
goes back to a single woman 4,500 to 6,000 years ago based on
What?
mutation rates? Why does the mitochondrial DNA, listen, okay, because maybe...
Donnie, you should calm down. You're getting really agitated right now. You know that? You should really try to calm down.
You're taking a nap during
All
these
right.
questions. Why does the mitochondria... I showed the phylogenetic tree on the screen twice. Can you reiterate my points on that?
There's a simple answer to that.
All right.
Well, I want to see if First Amender was listening. The mitochondrial DNA
next,
phylogenetic tree that I had on screen, I mean, I could pull it up again, but I don't think Mike wants his screen sharing right now.
If it's just a question. would be
Hold
great.
on. Do you believe that the mitochondrial Eve is
Yes.
like... Stop! I didn't even finish the fucking question. You're answering yes. Shut
the
up.
fact,
Hey,
the
you're
fact that
crashing
you're
out.
doing
Yes,
F-bombs
I'm
He's
means
crashing
You're
out.
being an
He's
idiot.
literally
You're being
crashing
an idiot.
out,
Stop
bro.
being an idiot.
Calm down. I know you're
I'm
excited.
going to
Calm
ask
down.
you once again. Do you believe
be
that
okay.
mitochondrial Eve was literally the woman Eve in Genesis?
That's what I was presenting the whole time that you were taking a nap. Observe mutation rates based on these pedigree studies like the Parsons paper.
Parsons was a single generation study. It wasn't multi-generation. I've been over this so many times. He knows why this is wrong. It's ridiculous. He might even say the FBI thing. Let's see if he says it. I don't know.
Eve back 6,000 years ago. The mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic tree that I showed on screen shows 6,000 years worth of DNA differences. Separating any two people from Eve is roughly 20 to 30 DNA differences.
There's another misrepresentation. He says the average is 20 to 30 differences in the mitochondrial DNA, which is true. But what matters if you're trying to calculate the time to most recent common ancestor is the maximum divergence right? You need to take the two most different people from each other and work those backwards to the common ancestor. And that's not 20 to 30 differences, it's 120. Okay, so there's another way he's wrong there. I've personally explained that to him. And here we are, just saying it like just in one ear, out the other.
If Eve lived 100 to 200,000 years ago, like you believe, there
did
should
not
be a
answer my
lot more
question.
mutations. Why aren't there more mutations?
You're
Go
not
ahead.
answering my question.
Purifying selection. The answer is purifying selection. And also, creationists get the math wrong on this. They say there should be 70,000 mutations in the mitochondrial genome. If you ever hear a creationist say that, you say there should be 70,000 mutations in the mitochondrial genome if evolution was correct, given the timescales, ask them how big the mitochondrial DNA is. Like, how many base pairs are there in there? It's about 16,000. So the follow-up question is, okay, creationists, how do you really think like that's an accurate representation that there could be 70,000 mutations in a DNA molecule that's only 16,000 base pairs long? Because that's the thing creationists will say. They'll say there should be this many mutations, and that number is bigger than the size of the DNA molecule. And you should call them on that. Anytime they say this, there should be way more mutations, ask them how many and how that's supposed to work.
Question. I'm asking.
I just
you
said
once
yes.
more.
It's the
Directly
biblical
answered
Eve.
your question, but
Okay.
directly
You
answered
believe.
your
Okay. So you believe that it is biblical Eve.
Yes.
Why
Okay.
Eve and not Noah's wife?
No. Well,
Because Noah only had the sons that are passing the DNA. Ron should know this. This part is frustrating because you need to know your opponent's arguments, right? It's Y chromosome Noah rather than Y chromosome Adam, because it's Noah and his three sons, and then everyone's descended from there, right? And then on the female side, you don't have the daughters from Noah. It's unrelated daughters-in-law, right? So that's not going to go to Noah's wife because she's not passing her mitochondrial DNA to any subsequent daughters. They're going to the sons, but the sons don't pass their mitochondria to their kids, right? So it's because it has to go back further. Which, by the way, is contrary to the actual data. The mitochondrial most recent common ancestor, like when you do the math correctly, is 100 to 200,000 years ago. The Y chromosome is 2 to 300,000. Creationists have that flipped, where the mitochondria is 6,000 and the Y chromosome is only 4,500 because it has to be Noah has to represent the Y chromosome, most recent common ancestor. That's what's going on here. That Ron, like, you should understand that.
First of all,
He's not answering my question, Mike. He's not answering. I asked him, why isn't there more mutations?
The Adam and Eve are not referring to a physical human group of people.
I know the argument. That's the assertion. You're dodging. If what you're
then why
saying
do you
is true,
think that
if
the
what you're saying is
mitochondrial
true and
Eve
it's
is
not
talking
actually,
about the same
I know you're
thing
excited.
as
The beginnings
literal
of your
Eve?
sentence.
I've lost count of the number of times Donny and Sam have said something like, I know you're excited, rather than answering the question that First Amender is asking, right? Or addressing the point that he's making. I also love the indignation that First Amender apparently in this very moment realized that these young Earth creationists think that mitochondrial Eve represents an actual literal single human woman, which is hilarious watching someone come to that realization on camera in real time, and just like the indignation and the shock that somebody could believe something so silly, just like in the context of population genetics, where like most recent common ancestor has a specific meaning and it's not the first individual of a specific group of organisms. It's something to watch.
Are starting in the middle of mine.
This is actually wild.
It's a very basic question.
That's
It's a very
true.
big.
That's
I think
just
we need to go back to
idiotic.
1 minute.
Yeah,
we need to go back to 1 minute.
We never
response.
left that. You guys just started interrupting each other, and I thought we might be able to get through. But anyways, like that's why I said overtly, I'm gonna let it go for a second because we didn't talk about leaving it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go back to the minute. But I do want to clarify for the audience if Donny, you are, as First Amender was just saying, conflating or equating the two things, mitochondrial Eve with the actual Eve. I think that was a point that maybe could be clarified if he's confused about it. Was that First Amender? Did I get that right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, if you're,
I'll give him a minute to respond to that, and then I gotta let Ron talk for 2 minutes. I think that's fair.
Okay, that's fair. So if you could, Mike, just let me screen share so the audience can see what I'm referring to.
All right, I just started
Okay.
the time.
Okay, let me start my timer too, because I got to get all this. This is a mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic tree. The evolutionary position is the out of Africa model that mitochondrial Eve goes back 100 to 200,000 years. Okay. So the biblical position is no, this is biblical Eve. Eve goes back roughly 6,000 years ago. What does the data suggest? Well, let's look at the data. You can look at dozens of pedigree studies. The Parsons paper is one of them. You see that the mutation rate is fast. It's about one every few generations, low diversity. Okay.
Not gonna talk about the mutation rate stuff because I already did it, but here we go with our mitochondrial phylogenetic tree, the famous unrooted tree. Perfect.
20 to 30 separating people from Eve, max 140 in these deep lineages. Mutation rates are variable. All of this points to Eve going back 6,000 years. Where in the evolutionary model do you have an Eve of all people on the planet going back 6,000 years? You don't. So my question is, if what First Amender is saying is true, why is there not mutation saturation? Why is there not thousands of generations and hundreds of mutations in the mitochondrial chromosome? Go ahead.
The answer better would just be selection, right? Just say the word natural selection. Purifying selection removes the harmful mutations because the mitochondrial genome is full of really important genes, and if those genes are damaged, then there's a fitness cost to that, and the cells with the mitochondria, with the mutations, don't survive. Therefore, the substitution rate, the rate of mutation accumulation, is far slower than the mutation rate, the rate at which mutations occur. That's the answer. However long that took, that is the answer to the question Donnie just asked.
All right, close your. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the human population wasn't
Start at the time right now. After your minute, Ron, 2 minutes. Just a reminder. Go ahead. Starting it over.
Yeah. So the mitochondrial Eve is not referring to a literal Eve. What it is referring to is that there was an overall human population where you would have had thousands of individuals, not one. That's not physically possible from a genetic perspective. Mitochondrial Eve is simply happening because that is the woman where their maternal lineage never went extinct. So what you would have is hundreds of thousands of years of lots of different mixing lineages. They all die off, only one line survives. That would be mitochondrial Eve, but thousands would have been existed. So that would be an example. Say, for example, if we observe Neanderthals, Neanderthals don't fit at all in the biblical account. But that, so a good example is like if Alice's descendants were alive, but then their maternity died out. And Beth, their maternity died out. Carol, their maternity died out. Dana, their maternity died out.
All
but
right.
Eve maternally survived in their line.
Mike, can
Well,
I
you
get a minute?
understand?
That was a good explanation. I think it needs, like, we could tweak that a little bit just to be clear that, like, those other people could have male offspring, right? That their actual genetic lineage could persist, but because the maternal lineage is interrupted, you don't have that mitochondrial lineage persisting, right? That's, I think, what's missing there. But otherwise, like, that was a good answer to the question of, like, kind of what a mitochondrial most recent common ancestor is and how it's not just one specific individual that literally everybody is entirely descended from, which is how creation is presented.
To be fair, because there's a
no,
lot
to
there.
be fair, I gotta let Ron talk right now. That would be fair, because every
I
time
don't
I've
even know
been
what I would say. This
trying to do it.
discussion has just spun so wildly out of control that I don't even know what to do here. Except I'm genuinely curious. Why do you think mitochondrial Eve is Eve, biblical Eve, and not Noah's wife?
Are you?
Because we're all descended from Eve, but then God
Ron, you
did
should know
this
the answer
big
to that question.
Cosmic reset, right? And then there was this second bottleneck, which is Noah's wife. I don't even think she had a name, did she? So
I can answer that if you'd like.
yeah, no, I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, well, it's the same reason why chromosome Adam is technically Y chromosome Noah, because it would be Noah off the ark with the flood bottleneck. But
Yeah.
Eve, you'd have, like, in that phylogenetic tree, Ron, that's worldwide mitochondrial DNA from all sorts of women on the planet. That whole tree would basically represent Eve, but within that tree, you'd see that bottleneck event where you have Eve's, you'd have Eve roughly 1,600 years later, you'd have Noah's wife, like you said, their 3 sons, but their 3 wives. So Noah's 3 daughters-in-law would have that mitochondrial DNA. But how closely
wait. What? 3 daughters-in-law?
Right. Well, because Shem, Ham, and Japheth would have 3 wives, right?
Sure.
Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Okay, this is where, if you're going to debate creationists, you need to know their arguments better than they do. Because now you're just giving him an opportunity to explain his nonsense, right? No, you need to know the answer to this question to either not ask it or frame it as ridiculous, given the mitochondrial phylogenetic tree.
Japheth are
And where did
Noah's
they come from?
daughters. Well, they would have came from the pre-flood world. They married Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the haplogroups on that tree, L, M, N, and R. Isn't it interesting that we have 3 or 4 major haplogroups, yet the Bible says that all people today go right back to Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their 3 wives. Their 3 wives would have mitochondrial DNA,
Okay, so that
which
was
would then spread to Europe, China, Asia, and the rest of the planet.
that was the time there.
Okay. Donnie knows that's wrong. I'm so happy he made that argument because he knows that's wrong. Because that 3, the 3 like groups of mitochondrial DNA coming from Noah's sons' wives, and that's like each of those branches on that mitochondrial DNA tree with those 3 central nodes, where each node represents one of those women. He knows that's wrong because that argument comes from Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson. Standing for Truth, at some point, it's June 2026 as I'm sitting here recording this, and at some point recently, I think it was this year, it might have been late 25, but I think it was this year, Standing had on Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, and this topic came up, and Jeanson explained how, yeah, that was a hypothesis I had with the 3 groups corresponding to the 3 wives, but I don't really accept that anymore. That was just an idea I had, but it didn't really shake out. So the guy who came up with that idea, the guy where Donnie is getting this idea from, has said, I don't buy that anymore. He said that in a conversation with Donnie. I forget who else was there. Maybe Sam was there. I don't remember. I think Sam might have been there too. I'm going to show that clip because it's really important to show everyone directly just how dishonest Donnie is here. This is where the Donnie Deals, ex-used car salesman really comes through, right? He is using an argument right now where the person who came up with the argument said to him that the person who came up with the argument, does not accept it anymore. He said, I've moved on from that. It was a hypothesis, didn't shake out. Donnie, despite having been told that to his face directly by the person who came up with it, turns around and uses that same argument in a debate. Amazing. So here's that clip of Jeanson kind of walking that one back to Donnie, and then you can juxtapose that with Donnie making the argument right here in that debate to see how perfect that is. Check it out.
Which, by the way, as a side note, just to update my views, because this is a significant revision in replacing Darwin, I talk about there being 3 major groups which seem to correspond to the sons of Noah. It's a valid hypothesis. It was a good working model to explore. I've since rejected it based on these new discoveries. And it still fits, I think, very clearly the flood account and such. The details will get technical, better explained with diagrams. But anyway, creationists change their minds too, because these are working models that we update and test with time.
Okay, so I hope everyone kind of understands. You can see just like very starkly the level of dishonesty that we're dealing with here.
I want to give an equal response here to Sam. If he has anything to say, I'll put a minute on the clock, and then we'll give it back to First Amender or Ron to respond.
Yes and no. I do have another argument that I'd like to be engaged with, but yeah, I don't mind kicking this back to Donnie. I'll give my time to Donnie right now.
45 seconds.
Okay, 45 seconds. Back to what First Amender was saying, and then, yeah, eventually we can kind of put a bow on this. Like Mike said, we'll let Sam or someone else pick another topic. Mitochondrial DNA, what he's missing is coalescence. There's no such thing as you'd need random mating in the past to get one single Eve in the evolutionary model.
Wrong. A mitochondrial most recent common ancestor, like any most recent common ancestor, is a mathematical necessity. Period. The end. If you don't realize that, you don't understand how evolution works. You don't understand the basics of like population genetics and phylogenetics. Just straight up. You don't need random mating or any of these other unrealistic things to get a single coalescent most recent common ancestor. Okay? You don't need that. It's a mathematical necessity. And if you don't understand it, what are you even doing? Well, the answer for the creationists is that this isn't about the science. It's about, promoting their religious belief, putting on a show to try to make evolution defenders look incompetent, right? That's what we're doing here. But I would love for someone to call him on this because, my God, like, this is very basic. Like my, 200 level evolution class college students could explain why this is wrong. The 200 level class I teach every year. You come out of that intro to evolution class, you could explain why what Donnie just said is wrong. Like, it's not hard. It's not complicated. And you don't even really need to do the math. You just conceptually can explain why that's wrong. But here Donnie is either out of ignorance or dishonesty making just quite the claim there.
But historically, especially in the out of Africa model, you'd have people marrying within their tribes. You're not going to have random mating where, like today, you get someone from Australia who could marry someone in.
You don't have random mating in the biblical model either because you have a whole lot of inbreeding. So, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, double standards galore.
America or Canada, someone in Europe. Historically, you wouldn't have that. So you're not just going to get one single female lineage, but what he completely dodged is the fact that, no, it comes down to DNA diversity. It's very...
You'll notice that he changed gears there. Here's a bunch of bananas claims, but then he said, but what he really did, and now that's going to get First Amender or Ron to respond to that instead of that litany of other things that he said that was wrong, right? So this is a very typical Gish Gallop. Throw out a bunch of wrong things and then end with something that you want your opponent to focus on the shiny object and ignore all that other wrongness. It's ridiculous.
Low, on average 20 to maybe 30 between any two people separated from Eve. The mutation rate is very fast. So how long does it take to accumulate those differences? Just 4,000 to 6,000 years. The question is, where is the evolutionary model? Where's the thousands of generations in mitochondrial DNA? There should be many more mutations, but there's not.
There's literally the paper you should cite on this for anyone is Soares et al. 2009, correcting for purifying selection. If you Google that, you'll find the paper. And it's basically looking at the effects of purifying selection on the substitution rate in the mitochondrial DNA. And that's the answer to his question. That's it, straight up. That's the answer. If you're going to debate creationism about genetics, and specifically if you're going to debate Donnie, you need to know his arguments inside out and know exactly what the answers are. There's the answer. I've explained this to him. He's heard it. I don't know if he knows it. I don't know if he understands it. But I know Donnie has heard the answer to the question he is asking repeatedly. I know this because I have explained it to him.
Ron or First Amender, who wants to take it from here? Minute on the clock?
Yeah, I mean, he's already said that he literally believes that the mitochondrial Eve is literally Eve, which is that. I mean, I'm just actually curious if this applies in other fields of science to him. At what point, physicists at CERN were having a hard time finding the Higgs boson, and so they referred to it as the God particle. Was the Higgs boson literally God?
Do you have a rebuttal to the argument that Donnie made?
Man, wow, not answering any of my questions.
Once again, I said earlier that Sam exists purely to derail the conversation and apparently sit half out of frame. And that's exactly what he's doing here. His job is to derail the conversation, to play tail gunner for Donnie so that he doesn't have to answer a difficult question, because this is actually a valid thing. Do you understand figurative language? Here's another example. Do you think they meant that literally? What's wrong with you? Right? And instead, we're gonna interrupt and obfusate.
Provided multiple rebuttals.
This is bad for you personally. This is bad.
Answer my question.
All you did was named a bunch of fields and then said, "Oh, they're all explained through
evolution." Can't they answer simple questions?
I'll answer the question when you're done. This guy needs some milk. Check it out.
And First Amender for a second. First Amender, restate the question for the audience in case I got lost real quick.
Okay.
He asked if the Higgs boson particle.
What's better? I'll let Sam Steelman.
Terrible moderation. First amender, repeat the question. Sam jumps in and tries to steamroll, and the moderator goes, yeah, go ahead, Sam, steamroll, do the thing that I just said not to do, right? Ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
So-
let's have Sam ask the question and Steelman it. Yeah.
Right. So he asked if the Higgs boson particle was God. He scoffed a little bit that we believe something based on an argument that Donny gave. So to answer your question,
That wasn't the question. That wasn't the question. We all literally just watched and heard the question. That wasn't the question.
no, we can say that God is that which.
I'll let Sam steelman the question, and then Sam strawmans the question, and Magic Mike over here is just like, whatever, it's fine. Remember at the beginning? Everyone sucks here, including the moderator.
Is ultimate, fundamental, a mind and creator. So God would not be a Higgs boson particle. That's kind of silly for you to even ask that question, being that you're so hostile towards what we believe, but apparently you don't know. But I asked you a question. I asked you if you have a rebuttal to the argument that Donny made. Donny made an argument. You ran over to a particle accelerator and you asked if something was God.
Well, I
Yeah, he
not a
requested
rebuttal.
specifically that I.
That was not what happened there. We all saw what happened there. That was not what happened there.
Explain the mechanism, and I provided a very detailed explanation to the exact mechanism, and then he asked for some papers requesting where you have got that information, and then I provided the
Argument that he
exact
just
papers
made.
All right, Sam.
that posits that exact information. I don't know what
Before-
else you want from me. Now,
Hold
here's
on
the
for a
problem.
minute. Hold
If
on.
you could acknowledge, if you could acknowledge that the Higgs boson is not literally God, despite the fact that physicists called it the God particle, isn't it fair to say
Stupid
that
argument.
when
The debate
science-
topic is
isn't
genetics,
it
by the
fair
way.
to say
Stop interrupting. Moderator, mute them. Like, this is the moderator's job in a situation like this, is to mute the people who are continually interrupting.
shut up?
Mike,
Yeah,
can you
yeah.
remind
Finish.
First Amender the debate
That's
topic
off.
It is
genetics?
an analogy.
All
Do you
right.
not
I know you're
understand the
excited,
simple
First
analogy?
Amendment, but you're not
It's-
answering
it
anything.
is, but I'm gonna
One more time.
let
One more
Ron
time.
respond
It's
to
a
Sam
dodge.
before this point is lost.
I didn't even.
And
I did.
then-
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
I didn't
No,
even.
There's no point.
I'm
First
going,
Amender, you
I'm
are.
going to
I didn't
use my
even-
time here to
Yeah.
cry foul
Yeah,
because
that was ridiculous.
even though I don't fully agree with all
Say that
of-
again, Ron.
I'm going to
Start
cry
over,
foul.
please. I didn't hear the first sentence, the first part of your sentence.
Because we're talking,
I'm going
shut
to
up.
use my allotted time to call foul.
Okay.
Hear that?
Yes, thank you.
And the foul I'm going to call is that both of you are interrupting Amender while he's in the middle of answering your questions. And as a result of doing that, you are missing a lot of the valid points that he's making. And the valid point that you're missing most recently is that the Higgs boson that he brought up sounds like a non sequitur, but he was using it as an analogy. Because just because scientists attach a label to something doesn't mean that you can read into that label any kind of greater meaning. So just because scientists discovered that all human lineages trace back to a single human female 150,000 years ago, that is the scientific consensus.
No, not 150,000. That's
That is
based
the
on
scientific consensus is 150,000 to 200,000 years ago.
How do they get the 150,000?
Stop interrupting. That's not that. Stop trying to derail the conversation. This is where the moderator needs to jump in and say, you're muted to Donny and Sam so that Ron can make his point. Ron has had probably, out of 4 participants in this debate, I would be surprised if Ron has spent 1/8 of the time talking, right? Completely asymmetrical here. The moderator needs to do his job in this situation, and Ron is making a valid point, the same point that First Amender made that Donny and Sam interrupted, and Donny is jumping in to argue against a different point, right? Ron is not making the affirmative claim here that mitochondrial most recent common ancestor was 150 to 200,000 years ago. He's saying the consensus is that, which is an undeniable fact. The consensus is that. Now, in reality, it's also true that that individual existed 100 to 200,000 years ago. But that's not what Ron is saying. He's saying the consensus is that that person existed at this time in the past, right? Donny is jumping in to say, but let's argue about that. Irrelevant. He's trying to change the topic to get back to his script because First Amender's point with the Higgs boson knocked him off his script. So he's trying to get back is what's going on here.
I have no idea. I'm not a
Exactly.
biologist, but
Right. That's the point.
that is the science.
See, And there you go, SFT succeeded. Because Ron, instead of calling him on it, said, I don't know the answer to your question. Now Donnie looks smart and Ron looks dumb, right? That is a failure of the performance of the debate by Ron. What Ron should have said there is, you're changing the topic. Listen to the words I'm actually saying. Are you having a comprehension issue? Am I being unclear in the words I am saying when I say the consensus is X, Y, and Z? Right? Do you understand what that means, Donnie? Because you're responding with something that's unrelated. Right? So I'm questioning whether you understand what those words actually meant. That's the appropriate response to that, not to take Donnie's question at face value and say, I don't know because I'm not a biologist. Well, then maybe you shouldn't be participating in this debate if you don't know an answer to that basic question. Because there is a very simple answer to the question, but it's not relevant to the point that you're making. So don't get knocked off topic. Creationists love to knock people off topic. That's what's going on here. And I think Ron kind of fell for it on that one.
Scientific consensus, just because they called her mitochondrial Eve.
We would
Yeah,
address
but
the
Ron,
consensus
I
on-
brought this point up to you
3
5
times
years ago
now.
when we debate. I brought this point up and I brought up all these.
You
There's
bring it
at
up
least
every time you
5
debate.
Well, exactly. So why don't you guys have an answer if I bring this
Right.
up every time?
That's a good question, Donnie. And you're right. They should have a good answer because you bring up this stupid point every time. Donnie knows why it's wrong. Why is the mitochondrial Eve stuff wrong? I'll give you 3 reasons. 1, purifying selection in the mitochondrial DNA slows down the fixation rate relative to the mutation rate. 2, he's cherry picking his papers. He's leaning exclusively on single generation pedigrees instead of using multi-generation pedigrees that are directly observed with the slower accumulation rate. 3, he's ignoring somatic mutations that the papers he cites, Parsons from the 90s and then Ding from 2015, doesn't weed out or filter the somatic mutations, the mutations that occur outside of the germline. And if you include those mutations, you artificially inflate your mutation rate. Those are the 3 reasons why he's wrong, right? You've got purifying selection, your data sets include somatic mutations, and you're cherry picking your papers to exclude data that contradict your conclusion. That's the answer. Now, Ron and First Amender should know that, because that's the answer. He said, I bring this up every time. Why don't you know the answer? Valid question. Ron and First Amender should know that answer if they had prepared, right?
There's at least 5 pedigree-based studies. Parsons is a well-known one. Based on known observed mutation rates, Eve goes back just 6,000 years ago. Based on overall genetic diversity, problems with coalescence, you can't get Eve 100 to 200,000 years. They calibrate the data. They say, oh,
Calibrate the data based on observed events, right? Events that we agree on the timing, like when the Canary Islands were settled, or when like Vanuatu was settled. This is within the last few thousand years. This is within the biblical time frame. Another example that I love is Tristan da Cunha in the Atlantic Ocean. You can calibrate your mitochondrial substitution rate based on the settlement of Tristan da Cunha in it's like 1816 or 1820, which is in the last 2 centuries, right? These are not dates that are up for debate. The Norfolk Islands are another example where we can calibrate, and creationists treat calibrate like a dirty word. Calibrate just means, here's something we know, let's make sure our data set aligns with that, right? We're going to use that as a signpost for our data set. That's what calibration is, right? We have a certain number of mutations and we know the date, so therefore we have our rate. Okay, that's what we mean when we say we calibrate the mutation rate. We calibrate it based on known events in the past where the date is not up for debate. It's within not just the biblical time frame, it's within like observed human history. Another good example of this is a paper, I think it was from 2014, dating or identifying rather the remains of King Richard III of England, right? We know when King Richard III was alive, right? So we can use that to calibrate the mitochondrial mutation rate between the past, whatever that was, the 14, whatever, I think it was 1400s, and the present, right? We can calibrate the rate because we know that time in the past based on a known historical event. That's what calibration is, and creationists like Donnie treat that like it's a bad thing. And I think they're being dishonest when they do that.
well, the mutation rate's fast, but we know evolution's true. We know humans share a common ancestor with chimpanzees. So let's look at the differences and we get a slow right, but fixation equilibrium demolishes that. So why don't you guys answer the question?
Look.
Why is the mutation rate fast?
Yeah, so
why is there low diversity if
How-
E goes
how
back
we
100?
determined-
It's like I can't even finish a single question without
Got a lot of nerve complaining about being interrupted right now. A lot of nerve.
First Amender jumping in. The question is this: the
'Cause I have the answer.
mitochondrial chromosome. We understand the mutation rate is fast. Go read the Parsons paper. There's at least 5 others you could read on that. Okay. And why is there low diversity if Eve goes back 200,000 years ago?
Sir,
It is unacceptable that neither of those two can jump in and say, because strong purifying selection is operating on the Y chromosome, because you're cherry picking single generation pedigrees, and because the papers you're using don't filter out somatic mutations. It is unacceptable that neither Ron nor First Amender can answer that question. Like, there's 3 very simple responses that demolish the point Donny is making. That doesn't take long to explain those responses. You need to be prepared if you're going to participate in a debate like this. Unacceptable.
can I take that?
Yeah, full minute to
Yeah, go ahead.
respond. The other 2 guys just don't interrupt. We'll mute both of you, and then we'll give it back the moment that time is done. So don't cut them
I
off at the
don't
last 40 seconds.
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. But when I search for mitochondrial Eve, this AI summary comes up that says mitochondrial Eve is the most recent common matrilineal ancestor.
Jesus Christ. We're using AI summaries instead of just knowing what you're talking about. What are we doing? If you watch this video, anybody watching this video, and then you decide to debate creationists, you better know what you're talking about. You better have your responses to these points ready. Because what's happening here is Donny and Sam, really just Donny, because Sam doesn't know anything and he can barely string together a sentence, but Donny is making these technical sounding arguments that have been explained to him why they're wrong, and he makes the arguments anyway, counting on his opponents to not know the answer. And in this case, that was a correct guess on his part. His opponents obviously do not know the answer. If you are going to participate in a debate like this and you watch this video, you better be able to respond correctly when this comes up. I will be personally offended if I find out that you have watched one of my videos and did not know the answer to this thing when it pops up if you participate in an event like this. And Ron, I'm talking to you because I know you're going to do this again. So you better know what you're talking about next time.
Ancestor of all living humans, meaning all humans descended from her through an unbroken female line. She lived in Africa around 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. Now, that may be wrong, but that's what an AI gets out of doing this web search and compiling all the data. And so by default, I, as somebody who doesn't have expertise in biology, accept that as the scientific consensus, if not the actual truth. Now, the burden then is on you if you want to argue that this AI got it wrong, or if I'm pretty sure that if I went to Wikipedia, that it would have the same information there. Why have all these sources gotten it wrong?
Because they're calibrating the data since they assume evolution's true.
I already explained that. What he's saying without saying here is that they assume human chimp divergence 7-ish million years ago and calibrate it based on that, but that's wrong. You don't have to assume human chimp common ancestry to get this math. You can just look at multi-generation pedigrees and documented historical events in human history to do it. No evolutionary assumptions required.
Again, why?
Why would an AI assume evolution is true if it wasn't?
Well, you got to ask AI the right question. Ask AI, how do they get the 100 to 200,000 years? And then they're going to say, well, it calibrates.
If you want to adjourn and reconvene with another debate specifically on mitochondrial Eve and give me a chance to do my homework on that, I will happily engage you on that. But all of these details are really beside the point.
No, it is. Well, I just want to say this, Ron. I got to say, I think you're wrong there, because the question is, does genetics support creation or evolution? We've shown that the genetic data in the Y chromosome suggests that humans and chimps are not related.
You have not shown that.
I've shown the paper that suggests.
No, you haven't.
The Y chromosomes are less than 30% the same.
Let me explain why you haven't.
See, the 30% structural, not sequence.
Okay. And the mitochondrial DNA, because you just said you'd have to come back and prep for.
I understand.
That's a major point, though.
All
That's
of
a
this
major
is
point
going
on our
way-
side.
Stop getting distracted, Ron. He's trying to distract you and doing it successfully. Do you see that? He said, I'm going to explain why the Y chromosome thing is wrong. And then Donnie got him to change his mindset and just go talk about something else instead of making the point. You need to focus and make the point and not get knocked off your train of thought. Like, it's hard when you're up against someone who's just gish galloping all over the place. They're talking specifically about the Y chromosome, and he goes, oh, but also the mitochondria, just throw that shiny object out, and then you're off on that. Don't get distracted. Say, stop, Donnie, stop changing the topic. You're jumping back and forth between mitochondria and Y chromosome. I'm going to address the Y chromosome, and then if you want, you can let my answer stand, and then we can go to the mitochondria. Or you can come back about the Y chromosome, but stop changing the topic, right?
Way over my head. I don't understand these details. I'm not a biologist. I've not studied biology. Amanda understands this stuff much, much better than I do.
But he doesn't understand it very well. I can tell you that.
Okay,
Anybody who understands it
will
looks at
grant
First
you that
Amendment and
that's a
said,
low bar, but that
I mean, I'm not a
getting-
biologist. I just read. That's
yeah,
it.
you read and misunderstand what you read, and you still haven't explained anything about.
Do you see how Donnie successfully prevented either Ron or First Amender from explaining the Y chromosome thing that we were going to... Ron was about to explain it. Donnie asked the question. Ron started to explain it. Donnie interrupted the answer, knocked him off topic, and now we're just trading barbs back and forth. Actually, it's just Donnie being a jerk to the other two, right? Does everyone see how that worked, how Donnie prevented the opponents from answering the specific question that he asked by interrupting like 2 sentences into Ron answering? Does everyone see how that went down? Just want to make sure everyone sees that.
The heterochromatin. You're not explaining why there's low diversity in the mitochondrial DNA.
I'm
you
not
haven't
a
explained
biologist.
functional ER
I've
He's
already
not a
explained that.
biologist.
I've already
Are you-
explained that.
Are you a
Okay,
biologist?
well, then I guess the debate. I've studied this for
Donnie,
years
are
and
you
years and
are you a
years.
biologist?
I'm not a biologist. I don't
Okay,
have
so
to be
you're
a
not a
biologist to know
biologist,
these
Sam. You're
arguments.
not a
though.
biologist.
But I quoted papers and showed papers written by biologists.
I'm getting to that.
But nothing follows from that, Ron. Do you have a PhD in communication?
Why can't you guys and Ron, because you have a PhD, that suggests you have critical thinking skills.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, and I like you, I love you, so I don't take this the wrong way. But we did debate the Adam and Eve question 5 years ago. I brought up mutation rates. If you go watch my opening statement, then I brought up a bunch of these papers. But it's always the same with you guys. Nobody ever has the answers. It's like, well, I'll look into.
All of the stuff that he is bringing up has been explained to his face multiple times. I know for a fact Erica Gutzik-Gibbon has explained the Y chromosome thing to Donnie multiple times. I personally have explained the heterochromatin situation to him with the Y chromosome. I personally explained that to him. I also have personally explained to him the mitochondrial diversity question in terms of purifying selection, somatic mutations, single versus multi-generation pedigrees, and also the inability of creationist models to accommodate Neanderthal diversity in mitochondrial DNA. I personally have explained these things to SFT. So here he is posturing, saying, oh, you evolutionists don't have answers to these questions. No. What Donnie is doing is he's picking his opponents, trying to find people who he thinks won't be able to answer these questions. What he's also doing is running scared from the people who do have the answers to these questions. He will not appear on screen with me, or with Erica, or Dapper Dinosaur, Jackson Wheat, a bunch of other people, I bet. Jordan from Reasons to Doubt, and John from Age of Rocks. He won't appear with any of us. And I could probably add more people to that list if I sit here and think about it long enough. He will not sit down in a debate with any of those people because he knows that we will be able to address the points he's making and illustrate very clearly and concisely why everything he's saying is wrong, and also take him to task for dishonestly repeating talking points that he knows are wrong because we have explained to him why they are wrong multiple times in the past, and he says it anyway, right? So that's what's going on here. This is, again, a show, right? This is a performance. This is not about scientific communication. It's not about constructing a scientific model or making an argument even. It's putting on a show. And by that metric, Donnie's putting on a show here, right? He's interrupting his opponents to make sure and then distracting to make sure they don't make the point that he doesn't want them to make, right? And that is something that you need to be prepared for when you are going to debate creationists, whether it's Donny or somebody else. Many of them will do this kind of thing.
It's like you guys don't want to look into it because you know that it contradicts evolutionary theory, and you guys are invested in being related to grass and ladybugs. So what's the reason that no evolutionists ever have answered?
The reason is that this forum, where we're in an adversarial...
I just want to say, I bet Ron doesn't finish this answer before he gets interrupted. I bet that happens.
Environment under time constraints, putting on a show for an audience. That is not the venue to litigate these kinds of questions. The venue where those kinds of questions are litigated is in the scientific journals. Now,
I want to respond to that.
Yeah, you've done a gish gallop of papers where you said that supports your position, but the biology community disagrees with you. So
I really only showed a few.
You're not a biologist, Sam's not a biologist, I'm not a biologist.
Where's the moderator on this? Just let him talk.
Amender's not a biologist.
Yes, so hold on.
The people who are biologists
Ron, I want to
say
respond
that
to that.
your papers are not sufficient.
Wrong, because one of the papers... No.
The moderator just said, stop interrupting, let him put a bow on it, and then Donny starts yelling right there. The moderator needs to mute Donny and Sam at this point.
Solution.
The paper that Sam, I'm going to hand it to you, but the paper...
And instead, the moderator gets steamrolled here. Absolutely awful moderating performance.
From the conventional literature on mitochondrial diversity and the Eve consensus sequence, that paper was written by Dr. Rob Carter, a young Earth creationist marine biologist. He agrees with me, not you. And that paper was from the conventional literature.
Okay.
That paper that he's referencing is the Carter, I forget the year, the mitochondrial most recent common ancestor consensus sequence. In that paper, Carter says that about 80% of the mitochondrial genome is constant across all humans. As we've sequenced more of the mitochondrial DNA, that number has gone down, but it's still more than half. That is very strong evidence in favor of strong purifying selection operating on the mitochondrial DNA, which means that the single generation mutation rate creationists used cannot be extrapolated as a long-term substitution rate. Because when you have purifying selection, the substitution rate slows down relative to the mutation rate. So Rob Carter's paper on this, which is a totally legit, conventional, peer-reviewed paper, totally legit paper, it doesn't actually say the thing Donny says it says. He's kind of extracting meaning that's not stated in the paper. He's also getting it 100% backwards. The paper actually supports the opposite of what Donny is saying, because the evidence of strong purifying selection indicates that the slower rate of accumulation is correct, and the fast rate of accumulation that creationists posit, right, the mutation rate equals the substitution rate, that's incorrect. There's no way to get an invariant genome if the mutation rate equals the substitution rate, unless many loci in that genome are literally magically immune from ever experiencing mutations, ever. And obviously that's not the case, right? Because mutations are stochastic. So the paper that Donny is citing does the opposite of what he says it does in terms of the implications for the age of the mitochondrial most recent common ancestor. Again, I have to criticize Ron and First Amender for not knowing that, because this is a thing that creationists will do, is they will cite a paper, they'll either describe the paper or name the author, but they won't name the title or the year. They'll give some of the, there's a paper written by Dr. Carter that does X, Y, and Z, right? That shows X, Y, and Z. As a person debating the creationist, it's your job to know exactly what paper they're talking about. So when Donny says that, you go, that was the Eve consensus sequence paper, here's why you're wrong about that. They'll say, all species came into existence at the same time. You're talking about the mitochondrial bottleneck paper. Here's why that's wrong, right? You need to know this better than they do to effectively smack it down, because Donny is relying on the ignorance of the audience and his debate opponents for these tactics to work. And the opponents don't have to go along with that. You don't have to play your role as a useful idiot for Donny to use you as a prop, right? You can actually know this stuff as well as they do, so you know what they're going to say. So when Donny says something like that, and he does this hit and run allusion to a paper that he says supports his point, you know what the paper is, why he's wrong about it, And this is the most important part, you can explain it briefly and clearly enough for a non-scientific audience to understand why he's wrong about it. And then you put a cherry on top by saying, Donnie, I thought you were well versed in this. A few minutes ago, you just said you're not a biologist, but you've spent years studying this. Did you misunderstand the implications of that paper? Or are you dishonestly representing it to make the audience think something that isn't actually the case? Which is it, right? Put him on the defensive. Make him defend his conduct or his level of expertise when he's citing these things. Because if he's going to lean on the conventional literature, Ron is exactly right in the point he's making. And he's not making an argument from authority. I explained this earlier. Creationists will misrepresent what Ron is doing as an argument from authority, and that's not what he's doing. It's more of a Bayesian priors kind of thing, where he's saying, okay, you're saying the conventional literature says X, Y, Z, but the scientists who are immersed in that literature disagree with you. What's the explanation for that disconnect, right? And that gets at how Donnie is misusing these papers here, right? The answer to that question is creationists, Donnie and many others, misrepresent the findings that they talk about from the conventional literature. And as someone who's debating these guys, you need to be able to explain that, right? Like I just did, clearly, concisely, and like in such a way that makes Donnie look stupid or dishonest, right? He either doesn't know what he's talking about or he's lying about it. That's your job, right? So I want to see people doing that. I want to see people taking Donnie to task when he plays these games. But you have to know your stuff in order to do that.
I just want to point out, Ron, really quick. I mean, you've known that this debate's been coming for quite a while. You accepted the debate with First Amender. You're familiar with Donnie. He's been making these same arguments for a long time. I mean, just as a bystander, I can see that none of you guys ever deal with these arguments, and it's not like it's a surprise.
Because that's not our job.
That is like the first reasonable thing Sam has said this whole time. It's a fair point. You knew this debate was coming. You're familiar with Donnie's arguments. Why aren't you prepared? Is what Sam just said. I share that curiosity. Why aren't you prepared? Yes, I agree. You should be prepared.
So, well, it is when you come to debate evolution and you debate Donnie.
Well, then I have an answer for you.
Argument for so long. Okay, so yeah, I mean we're very underwhelmed.
Amender has an answer for you.
So let me ask you the question that.
Are you not interested in the answer?
Let me ask you.
You've been beating us for not giving you an answer, and now Amender says he has one.
I think
why do you not want to hear it?
Anyone here at this point?
I
right?
concur with that. I would like
Okay,
Sam
great.
to finish
So let me
whatever he's
finish my
saying,
statement.
and then if
That'd be
First
cool.
Amender wants to respond to something, I'll let him start that off by steel manning what the question is.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's fair, back and forth.
Yeah, so the question here that's on the table is how was it determined that these mutation rates are what they are? Or the difference between that which is observable, a pedigree mutation rate, and a calibrated phylogenetic mutation rate.
Also directly observable because like multi-generation pedigrees are directly observable. Just saying. That's the framing there is he's going to do like the historical versus, operational science or whatever, false dichotomy, and the long-term rates are directly observable.
That's the question on the table. One is a high quality line of science, that which can be observed, tested, repeated. The other one is just a just so story. But a lot of people believe it, Ron.
So
right?
I would also say something about this distinction you've been making about high quality science and low quality science.
I would love for First Amender to be able to answer that question because I want to see what he's going to answer.
That is an artificial distinction that's been introduced by creationists. It is not an actual valid distinction. There is no such thing as high quality science and low quality science. There is just science.
Put it that
there
way,
is just
but
the process of finding the best explanations that account for all the data. And
Ron was so close there. Just say like this framing was a creationist bit of propaganda. It comes from Dr. Rob Stadler. His book on how science works is completely absurd because in a whole book on how science works, not once does he mention the concept of hypothesis testing. Just say that and it blows up Rob Stadler's criteria all to hell, just like that. How can you write a book on how science is supposed to work and not mention hypothesis testing, right? That's it. Close. Ron, you're close, but you're not quite there.
now let's hear Amender's answer to the question that you've been insisting you really want to know the answer to.
Okay,
So,
start it off by, yeah. Tell
Yeah,
us
so
what his
just to
question
start
was.
off, FYI, when I'm referring to mitochondrial Eve, it's not referring to literally Eve in the same way
know.
that the Higgs
We know.
boson is not referring to a God particle, right? So it's not literally Eve, because that was your claim earlier.
Because
He
it
made
is.
an
So
argument.
how do we know specifically? Okay, you're saying it is, but then
Yeah,
it
he
isn't.
made an argument.
No, it is.
Contradiction.
They are interrupting him so they don't have to hear the answer. We only have a few minutes left. We have like 5 minutes left. We're going to see if he actually gets the answer out.
Already demonstrated.
Good
Now let's see
contradiction.
what your answer
Anyway,
is. Go ahead.
so mitochondrial Eve, how do we know that it was 150 to 200,000 years ago?
Is
Okay,
that what the
so let's
question
say,
was
for
right
example,
there? That Sam asked?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, okay. So let's say, for example, that we observe people that are alive today, right? Where we have like, person A related to, their son and then their grandmother, grandfather. We could observe that there are slight mutations that are dictated on a linear clock. From this, we use that molecular clock. Okay, it is the time equal to the number of mutations over the mutation rate. Okay,
pedigree?
so you asked specifically for the math
pedigree
function
rate?
for that. You asked specifically
Stop interrupting, Sam. Moderator, come on.
for the math function for
This is a
that. It is
clarification
the
question.
number of mutations
This is a
over the
clarification
He just
question.
wants to give a speech. There's no
establish-
clarity.
He's answering the question. Do you see this? I want an answer to this question. He's literally a minute, less than a minute into the answer to the question, and he's getting interrupted by Donny and Sam saying he just wants to give a speech. He's not answering the question. He's literally explaining the math that answers the question they are asking, and they are interrupting that answer because they don't want the audience to hear it. That's what's going on here, folks. When this happens, if you are participating in a debate, you need to call this behavior out. The moderator needs to rein this in. And if you're watching a debate, you need to call it out and ping the moderator in the chat so that they can rein this behavior in. This is manipulative. It's happened, I don't know how many times in this bit we've been watching. It's all the same thing. Ask a question, get the answer, interrupt the answer, and change the topic, distract, do whatever you need to do so the audience doesn't hear that answer.
So what was we, bud? You're just getting into the
asking for
audience.
the fucking
He's reading
answer.
from AI.
Crash
He's reading
out
from
again.
AI.
If that-
How come you
That's
can
a
never give an answer
clarification
in 20
question.
seconds?
We're
You
gonna
just
get-
start reading an essay.
We're going to get to the
reading a
closing
speech.
statements in 2 minutes, so I just let it finish, and you
No,
guys will have the last word since they started.
This is a point of clarification. And he crashed out when he
No,
invoked.
you're
no
asking
idea.
for
When he
an
invoked
answer,
the
and
crash
I'm
out
not
again,
getting
bud.
anything from
You're literally
from the
crashing
You don't know how to have a
moderator.
free
To
flowing
answer it.
discussion.
I
You're
can't
just
answer
reading
a
an
single
essay.
question.
Hey, this guy's unhinged. Okay,
The moderator at this point, Magic Mike over here, needs to mute Donny and Sam. This is ridiculous. They asked a specific question, First Amender is giving the answer, and now they're jumping in and yelling at him in the middle of his answer, and Magic Mike is over here doing whatever instead of moderating the debate. It's ridiculous.
asking
I'm
a
not
point of-
unhinged. I'm just
Totally
explaining it, and then
This
I'm
is bad.
notably
I thought you were-
upset
you're-
at
you
the
lost
at the
me.
willfully
Unhinged.
ignorant people
Yeah,
here.
you're literally insane. So I'm asking you, when you invoke
Dude, I'm
the
literally
mutation rate,
explaining it. You
Can
didn't
you
even
stop?
understand
You
it.
You didn't
even
explain.
let me
You were
finish.
reading an
Let
essay
me
from something
finish.
that
Hey,
someone
let
sent
me
you.
finish
Just
it.
answer the question
Let
in
me
20
No
seconds.
self-control.
Why is it a
Okay,
speech for you?
real
every
Zero.
day?
Answer the question, Donny yells at First Amender as he's interrupting First Amender's answer to the question. This is transparent to everybody else, right? We all see what's going on here. This is ridiculous. It's childish.
self-control.
So
What an
how do we know?
embarrassment.
How do we know? And then
No, when I'm asking when he invokes the mutation rate,
I
I'm
was
asking
explaining
if he's
it
talking.
step
There
by
you go
step.
again.
Is
Can
he
someone,
allowed to ask a clarifying
can you
question?
guys
to you
mute
first?
this
You're
guy?
so
I'm
insecure.
He's totally
Just
unhinged.
allow him to
I'm
ask
trying
the
to
question. and then
explain
you
your
can
if I
continue.
question.
wasn't
Well,
so
you're
sure
trying
if
really
we would do
hard to
this
fail.
and
I
do
mean,
well
Moderator.
into this-
Moderator,
Yeah,
can you
Mike,
moderate
can
Okay,
you
these
yeah,
two?
mod?
I'm gonna have to mute everybody here. All right.
Just have a clarification question.
I'm going to mute everybody, and then Sam is not muted, right? Come on.
Get the clarification out of the way because I don't want to waste the last 3.
I want to note here that First Amender got muted there. You can see First Amender got muted. Sam did not. The person who was interrupted got muted. The person doing the interruption was allowed to continue doing so. This moderation is awful.
2 minutes that we had, now a minute and a half on everybody saying you're interrupting me. So
Why
go
am I
ahead.
muted when I'm
Well,
You-
because I
you-
want to
there goes
hear what
again.
the clarification is before you complete, and I'm going to
Hold
give
on.
you the
If
full
they're
amount
if
of
they're
time.
asking a question, I'm explaining it rather than you muting
Why are
them,
you
being
still talking?
argumentative and
Why are you
interrupting.
still
Because
talking?
You're instead
it
muting
erupted
me.
into chaos because you won't just let the clarification.
It erupted into chaos because SFT and Sam interrupted First Amender. That's what happened there. Everyone saw it. Magic Mike is an awful, and at this point I have to say biased moderator for letting that continue. That was ridiculous.
Happen now after we've already gotten to the point of
Oh
the
my
interruption.
God.
So
Hey,
it's already been
that's how you
interrupted.
know-
It's already been.
This is ridiculous.
So I'm trying to
That's
just
how you
hear
know
it.
they
Okay.
took the L right
Just
here.
trying
Yeah.
to hear it
we-
so that's the last clarifying
I want to
point.
finish what I was trying
Let
to
him
say.
ask the question first. Why are you so insecure? Let him
just
ask the
Because I'm
clarifying question,
explaining
then
the first
respond.
question you
Guys,
asked. You
he
asked,
ran
how do
away.
we know it came to 150 to 200?
Meanwhile, Sam, like a middle school playground idiot over here, saying he ran away as he's being muted while he's answering the question. I just, the childishness. I need everyone to recognize that when you go to debate creationists, this is what you're signing up for. You're not signing up to have any kind of scientific conversation. You're signing up for like middle school cafeteria antics, right? This is what you're going to get. There you go. Especially if you do it on a platform like MDD, because this type of chaos brings views. So if your goal is to like inform people, get information across, put aside the fact that MDD like hosts literal Nazis and uses those Nazis in their promotional materials, like I showed at the beginning. Put that aside. This is the kind of thing that MDD wants to happen because this brings eyeballs, right? Whereas like people doing, you know, an Oxford debate where they're actually like making good points and having a conversation, that doesn't bring the same audience.
They ran
1,000 years
away.
ago.
I'm asking
You
your
asked
question.
that, so I'm explaining
Okay,
it.
so
Can I
real
ask the
quick,
question?
how much longer do you think that would take before the clarifying question, just so I can gauge which
I
one's going to
wrote
come
down
faster?
a total of
Hey.
3 paragraphs here. I got
Mike,
3
You mean
sentences
AI
in.
sent
Mike,
you a
hold
total
on,
of
Sam.
3
Hold on.
paragraphs?
I read.
got how
I
many
wrote
sections?
I'm
it.
sure
Okay,
you
okay.
did,
I
buddy. I'm
Googled
sure
it,
you
mod?
looked
did,
it
buddy.
up,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there it is.
First Amendment, real
Can you
quick.
mod?
Yeah. What
Cool.
period in through did you get? You said, or what paragraph?
Yeah,
in?
so I just have a point of a clear.
No, Sam, shut up. Now Magic Mike is asking First Amender a question, and you can't keep your mouth shut long enough for him to ask a question. Right? This is ridiculous. Magic Mike needs to mute everybody except First Amender here. It's been, by the way, a few minutes ago, I said there are 5 minutes left. I wonder if he's going to get his answer out. There's now approximately a little less than 2 minutes left, and we're going to see if he gets his answer out.
Clarification
I have
question?
3 more paragraphs
Okay,
to
no,
try
no,
to
no, I
explain
don't-
why it was.
I don't know if
yeah,
that's really
don't
gonna
want to
get through.
explain it. Okay, well then the answer is right.
This guy's crashed out.
We would have gotten through it if there hadn't been all this nonsense. It's literally 3 minutes of nonsense. Would have gotten through it. Would have gotten through it. But again, this is by design. This is what Donny and Sam want because they don't want the audience to hear the answer.
Is no answer that could ever be provided to you because you are not, nor were you ever interested in having a good faith debate on this.
Oh.
It is
What
very
about-
clear to me.
I'm just
Hey,
saying.
You
what's
guys
that?
are
For a
obviously
bit of a
I'm just saying I don't
challenge,
have the
every
time, but
single
that's-
position. I sat there and tried to explain it as clear as day that anybody could explain, but both of you showed yourselves in this.
Sam,
Look
can I have-
at you, what
Sam,
you're
can I have
doing.
one,
Hey,
brother?
Donny, bro, here, you want some?
Bunch of
Yeah.
You want some,
clowns.
Donny?
Come
Okay,
Come
so
here.
you know what?
Are
We're
you
gonna
done?
we're gonna
He's
move.
crashing out,
We're gonna
boys.
he's
move
He's
done?
into
crashing
the
out.
closing statements. We're gonna move into
Sorry,
the
I don't
closing
get to ask
statements.
my.
No, we don't have
Oh,
the
thanks,
time.
Mike.
Just for
That's
that,
why
we
I'm
need,
Right on,
we
Mike.
need the
That's
old
why I can't give
trusty.
him
We
the
need
time.
old
Thanks, Mike.
trusty.
Oh my
for
God,
this.
he's
We
gonna
should
drink.
just
All
go
right.
into
We need
closing
all
statements
trust.
because
No,
it's a waste of
timing
time.
thing.
We
It's
have
a
no
time
answers.
thing.
That's
Give me some
atheism in a nutshell, folks. Right there.
Oh God, you guys suck.
That's it.
Well,
Man.
it's all the Red Bull and
This is
alcohol
content.
you've been
Hey,
drinking,
this is
First
content.
Amender. It's why you're crashing
What a
out.
Okay.
trash
Hey,
argument.
somebody
bro.
call
40 seconds left. Didn't get it out. Donny and Sam succeeded in 5 minutes of complete BS preventing First Amender from answering the question that they asked. And they did that by interrupting him while he was giving the answer. And the moderator just let it happen. There you go, folks. That's how creationists will try to win a debate. They'll ask a question. While you're answering the question, they'll interrupt you, cause chaos, and then obfuscate enough that the moderator, who wasn't paying attention enough to clearly see what was happening, I guess, I don't know, then just kind of sides with the creationists, and we never get an answer to their question. And then they turn around and claim, oh, you can't answer my question, even though they prevented it by their conduct from being answered, right? Their specific conduct prevented that question from being answered.
Absolute
Nike,
trash.
if
Jesus
Nike is
Christ.
looking to sponsor
Man,
somebody,
if only,
First
if only,
Amender
if only I
ran
could find
right
the
off.
argument at the bottom
You
of this
guys-
bottle.
Chat, you like
Well,
this?
we
You
get
liking this,
5-minute
chat?
closings.
Yes.
You see, you said, chat, you liking this? Yeah, it's on purpose. This is the point. It's what they want.
So we get
Yeah.
5, so he can answer. He can finish answering with his
Yeah,
speech.
but that's
there.
going to be up to Ron if he wants to let First Amendment take the last 5 minutes of the
Let
closing.
Ron go. He's at least reasonable.
So we're going to go into closings, 5 minutes and 5 minutes, muted sides on each. You cannot interrupt, you can't laugh, can't do whatever. No interruptions on that. And then we'll get into the super chats, which there's going to be a lot more fluidity. I'm going to let you guys get a little bit more chaotic, and then I'll bring it back in when we got to get to the next questions. So we got through the debate, guys. Congratulations.
There you go. That's the end, folks. They got through the debate. All right, so let me just take a few minutes to put a bow on whatever that was that we just watched. What I really want to get across to everybody here is that what we saw was the creationists using every trick in the book to knock their opponents off of like the topic and obfuscate the points they were trying to make, distract Gish Gallop, change topics. They're manipulating the moderator, who was awful at doing his job to keep everything on topic. We saw the creationists even go so far multiple times as to ask a specific question, and then as their opponent is answering the question, interrupt them and yell at them for not answering the question. It's just all of the textbook, dishonest, manipulative tactics. We also saw Donny several times make an argument he knows is incorrect because someone has explained to him, in some cases me, why that argument is incorrect, even when that person is another creationist. And they're saying, here's an argument I used to make and I don't anymore, and here's why. Donny still makes that argument because his strategy is to count on his opponents not knowing the answer, right? Not knowing what to say in response to that. That is a thing he relies on, which is why he won't debate somebody who is more knowledgeable. Now, on the other side of things, on the evolution side, you have an obligation to know what you're talking about if you're going into a debate like this. So, Ron, you need to know the stuff you're talking about. You can't say, well, all the experts accept this, and you need to explain why that is if they're all wrong, but I can't explain it because I'm not a biologist, I'm not an expert in that field. That's not acceptable. You need to know it. You've done multiple of these debates over the last 5-6 years, right? Going back to 2020. Why don't you know the answer? Like Sam said at one point, the only valid thing Sam said that whole time is, Donny's been saying this stuff forever. Why don't you know the response? Accurate. Yeah, true. Good question. Anyone going into a debate like this on the evolution side needs to know exactly what the creationist arguments are, how they function, and what the quick responses are so that you can make the creationists look dumb and incompetent and weak, right? That needs to be your objective going into it. It's about the performance. And you can do that by conveying accurate science. You can do that in an entertaining way, but that needs to be the focus. And falling back on experts who are not present or a scientific consensus is not going to do that because that looks weak. And even though the way Ron does it, he's not making an argument from authority, it can be manipulated or misrepresented as that, right? And then First Amender did the best job of anybody there, but way too easily gets knocked off topic and also didn't know some of the quick responses. But just, you need to not fall for the shiny object that Donny and Sam are constantly throwing out there, because Donny does the Gish Gallop and now we're off on something else. And folks, if you're going to talk to Donny or any other creationist, you can't fall for that, right? And the last thing I'll say here is the moderation was awful. I don't know if it was biased by design, but it clearly favored the creationist side. You could see that at the end when First Amender was asked a question, started to answer the question, was interrupted by both Donny and Sam, and then the moderator said, well, First Amender, that you were going to mute you, right? That was totally inappropriate. There's also the screen sharing thing going on where Donny seemed to have power to share his screen. That's something the moderator alone should control. And the moderator shouldn't have to be put your screen down. The moderator should determine what's on screen at any given time. So the moderation was terrible in a number of ways there. So that was a giant cluster of a debate. I don't think anybody watching that learned anything, but that's not the point of such things. The point is to see which side comes off looking better, right? My recommendation is don't participate in a debate with Donny, because those are the dishonest, manipulative tactics he uses. Certainly don't participate in a debate with Sam, because he's a waste of space and exists only to knock the debate off topic. And if you can't resist and you're going to do it, don't do it on Modern Day Debate. That's the Nazi bar. They host literal Nazis. I need to remind you. Like, they literally use Nick Fuentes in their promotional materials. So, like, don't do that. All right, folks. That's where we're going to leave this one. Thank you all for watching. I hope... I'm not going to say I hope you had a good time, because we all know that was not a good time. But thank you all for watching. Before you go, remember to hit like, subscribe, or hit don't like. I don't care. Leave a comment, share this video. And if you want immediate access to my pre-recorded stuff like this, consider becoming a channel member so you don't have to wait for the public release. Thanks again for watching, and don't get fooled.